This channel is part of the History Hit network. Stick around to find out more.
Diana, Princess of Wales, is now divorced and all but discarded by the royal family, yet she remains one of the most popular and admired women in the world. Seemingly intended to take the royal family into the 21st century, she looked destined to follow in the footsteps of the Queen Mother as Queen Consort of Britain and the Commonwealth. But Diana was unable to cope with the turbulence of royal life, and she temporarily withdrew from her public duties.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with, hopefully, a more private life.
Equally unable to stay in the shadows, Diana's retirement was brief. Public adulation had become a powerful substitute for the warmth and affection she found lacking in her marriage. Refusing to go quietly, Diana still deploys her beauty and glamour to devastating effect. She is a limelight stealer of legendary proportion. Diana's charisma has ensured that she will not be a footnote in history, as her enemies intended. Once our future queen, she will be remembered for her special appeal. To many, she is a princess in her own right, one whose charm eclipsed the family who finally rejected her as a non-starter for queen. A princess alone, she rarely meets her former in-laws, and even more rarely does she appear relaxed with them. Disillusioned by her experience of royalty, Diana has turned away from their traditional style. At Viscount Linley's wedding to the heiress Serena Stanhope, Diana's individuality underlined her difficult position, neither totally in nor out of the royal family. On such occasions, she and they must tolerate each other. Then Diana must go her separate way and withdraw once more into the seclusion of her three-story apartment at Kensington Palace. Here, in the echoing emptiness of a palace that was never truly a family home, she tries to dispel her loneliness.
One of Diana's problems has been that she has tended to not be able to take being alone at all. I mean, solitude is not something that Diana has found easy to deal with. The minute there's a quietness, she has to get on the phone, she has to make contact with people, has to talk about how she feels. And it is incredibly difficult for her to be in that place of solitude.
Diana's future rests on her position as mother of the royal heir and spare, her sons William and Harry, her power base amid the uncertainties of her future. And Diana's status and lifestyle at present still depend on the support of her ex-husband, the Prince of Wales.
He gave her many solemn assurances that she wouldn't lose her status. Even in the very early stages, back in the 80s when it was aired a couple of times, the possibility of divorce, he was very concerned that she didn't lose any of her privileges.
In stripping Diana of the title Her Royal Highness, royalty lost one of its star performers. Diana's combination of regal dignity and Hollywood allure outshone the staid and formal House of Windsor. This was the last occasion she would join the royal family at a state banquet. Her power to outshine a glittering array of tiaraed and titled heads created undercurrents of rivalry and jealousy, which marred Diana's short reign as queen-in-waiting. Diana rebelled against her husband and his family, which resulted in her eventual divorce. Deprived of the life she should have had, Diana rejected Queen Elizabeth II's style of monarchy and created for herself a symbolic role.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country.
But she could actually be a very powerful figure behind the throne when William becomes king. She's lost out, I suppose, on being at Buckingham Palace, but you know, they say that's quite drafty and the Queen's very thrifty, so there isn't a lot of heat there. And I think she's got all the things she wants in a way. And possessions and houses might not be as important to her, because she's quite rich in her own right. She's not like Zsa Gabor, who said, I am a very good housekeeper. Every time I divorce, I get to keep the house. But I don't think that this was Diana's worry. She was quite well heeled in her own right.
If you love history, then you'll love History Hit. We have tons of exclusive documentaries about the most important people in history that you will not find anywhere else. We've got unrivaled access to the world's leading historians, with hundreds of documentaries featuring everything from Boudica to the British royal family. Not only that, but we have a huge podcast network releasing new episodes every day, so you'll always have something to listen to. Sign up now for a 14-day free trial, and Real Royalty fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use code REALROYALTY at checkout.
How is it possible to compensate a princess for the life that was snatched away? Charles made a generous divorce settlement worth today around £17 million. Diana amassed so many sumptuous gowns as Princess of Wales that recently she decided to auction some for charity. Each breathtaking dress was valued for being worn by the woman who was once wife of the heir to the British throne. Diana's wardrobe was vast. When stored, her dresses apparently spanned the width of 10 average terraced houses, and she had a 7-foot rack just for her blouses. But Diana kept the Aladdin's cave of jewels that marked every public triumph and private tragedy of her 15 years as Princess of Wales. Daughter of an aristocratic English earl, Diana is wealthy in her own right. With her Spencer Family Trust Fund and her private collections of memorabilia, Diana may be worth £40 million. Whether they cost £2,000 or £10,000, her gowns were not chosen for their price, but for their bewitching effect. Diana's beauty and glamour was a constant reminder to Charles of the wife he cast aside for another woman.
To quote someone, was it Ivan Trump, who said, don't get even, get everything.
Diana followed the pattern of other rich and underloved wives. Her response to her husband's treatment was to spend, 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 and he, like other dissatisfied husbands, grudgingly paid the price. Diana joined the ladies who lunch, frequenting smart restaurants in an effort to fill the lonely hours while Charles was busy elsewhere.
Because she's a rich, rich girl in her own right and comes from this sort of wealthy background, I don't think that the money was that important. It was the loss of prestige. It was the awful humiliation of the thing going wrong, because remember what a fairy tale marriage it all was. Disillusioning for us and, above all, for her.
Starting out with her fiancé in 1981, Lady Diana Spencer could never have guessed the treacherous road ahead. Her naivety matched her readiness to please. Hidden was the magic that would turn her from a shy teenager to a global enchantress.
She was a child, a Sloane Ranger of 19, not terribly well educated. I mean, she always herself would admit that the best prize she had at school was for having the finest groomed guinea pig. But she's actually very, very smart. But she was very fragile, I think, then. And she was 20 when she married the heir to the throne, 21 when she produced, first child. It was an awful lot to cope with. as we now know, it was almost a sort of medieval arranged marriage. And this girl from the Shires just developed and grew out of control. They thought she was going to be a sort of biddable creature, wearing slightly frumpy but acceptable clothes, and smiling and bowing and accepting flowers, but really not doing anything else, and bearing an air and a spare. But instead, of course, she was this stunning success. And it was very difficult for Prince Charles because the whole thing had got completely out of control. And, you know, I think he regretted it terribly. I mean, had she stayed behind the scenes, maybe they'd be married still today.
In looks, Diana is like her mother, Frances Shand Kidd, who was divorced acrimoniously by Diana's father and then lived in virtual exile with her second husband. The loss of her mother from the family home was one of the early causes of Diana's troubled personality. Diana's destiny was shaped by a sense of abandonment. Mothering her younger brother Charles developed Diana's caring side. Her eating disorder, bulimia, began while Diana was a teenager, in imitation of her older sister Sarah's problem with anorexia. Later, as Prince Charles's fiancée, she succumbed secretly to her old eating habits when pressures began to mount as she faced the most intensive public scrutiny.
She's always been disturbed. I think she's been plagued by demons since she was a child. And if you look back into her childhood and you see the difficult upbringing she had and the problems that she had as a teenager, long before she came into the royal family, she was just right made to be a royal in a crisis.
Charles's lack of understanding of Diana, 12 years his junior, sharpened the divisions between them. She wanted a romantic marriage. His needs were more pragmatic.
He'd reached an advanced age. He should have been married 10 years earlier, really. And whether or not there would be an heir and a spare was in some doubt for some time. All they were concerned about was that he marry and marry quickly and that she be a childbearing woman.
Diana quickly learned to pretend. Even on her honeymoon, she covered up her doubts and private fears.
Diana was still very young. She'd married Charles with very, very little experience and had come from a very shaky background where the main nurturers in her life had abandoned her one way or the other. So she was enormously emotionally needy.
Well, if she doesn't get her own way, her behaviour in the past has been to stamp her foot and shout and scream. There are an awful lot of rows go on behind palace walls.
What used to happen was when she felt Charles was drifting away and not connecting, you know, when she was perhaps unhappy or she needed to talk to him about something, instead of doing it and letting perhaps a little bit of breathing space to come between them, she over-demanded. She demanded his attention. She wanted him, and the more she grabbed his attention and the worse the stunts became, the emotional stunts to get his attention became, the further he went away.
He wasn't used to people answering him back. He wasn't used to, in particular, to women telling him what they thought, and he just turned his back on it and got out of the place. He just moved on. And I don't think he ever tried. He was just perplexed. He couldn't understand someone who, having been told what to do, didn't do it.
Diana's obstinacy meant that she lost out to her rival. In Camilla Parker Bowles, Charles had found the perfect confidant who shared his interests, towed the royal line, and never upstaged him.
I think Camilla's a very strong lady. Well, she was brought up in a different way. She has different interests. And I think she's had a relationship with Charles that was very unthreatening in many ways. I mean, Charles himself seems to be better able to conduct a relationship when he doesn't have to make a huge commitment. And there is something about the glamour and the romance of it all that tends to appeal to Charles very much. Whereas I think with Diana, maybe the same thing could have happened, and he had a wonderful, glorious affair with Diana for years and years and years, and she would have become that confidant, you know, the tables would be turned. However, I don't think Camilla would have behaved the same as Diana. I can see Diana fitting into Camilla's role very, very well, but I can't see the reverse happening with Camilla getting very upset at Charles's perhaps interest in other women. She has a less romantic view of marriage. Diana still has a romantic view of marriage. Camilla doesn't.
The volcanic private relationship between the Prince and Princess of Wales finally erupted in 1992. On their last joint tour, they embarrassed their Korean hosts by their negative and hostile conduct with each other. Nicknamed the Glums, they were never allowed to repeat this pantomime performance, which prompted private Foreign Office apologies to Korea. The couple separated, but still Diana feared leaving the royal house of Windsor, to which she had given so much.
I don't want a divorce, but obviously we need clarity on a situation that has been of enormous discussion over the last 3 years in particular. So all I say to that is that I await my husband's decision of which way we are all going to go.
There are just so many things that contribute to the breakdown of a marriage. You simply can't say it was one thing. It was the jealousy. And remember, two people make a contribution to a marriage splitting. And Diana made a lot of attempts to talk to Charles, to try to make their relationship work, even suggesting that they did things together at one point. She did a lot of work to try to make the marriage look better than it was. And it was Charles's feeling that it was hypocritical to appear in public or to do these little gestures that would make it seem all right. His belief that he should remain true to him, true to what was going on, was actually also part of the reason it kind of gathered momentum. And it may be, again, when we look at the intense media interest. I mean, any of us having a relationship difficulties, if we read about it every day, I think we'd all go galloping towards the courts a lot faster than if we were left, you know, to get on with how we might try to make a relationship better.
Diana's shameful friend, her bulimia, was a constant presence during these years. On an official visit to Canada, Diana lived on a diet of chocolate bars and needed medical attention when she fainted during a visit to Expo 86. Charles failed to recognise his wife's condition, forcing her to keep up royal appearances when she needed rest, recuperation and understanding. During their gatherings at royal residences such as Sandringham, family tensions made Diana's illness worse, resulting in cries for help.
So you have so much pain inside yourself that you try and hurt yourself on the outside because you want help, but it's the wrong help you're asking for. People see it as crying wolf or attention seeking, and they think because you're in the media all the time, you've got enough attention, inverted commas. But I was actually crying out because I wanted to get better in order to go forward and continue my duty and my role as wife, mother, Princess of Wales.
The vows she had made on her wedding day were sincere. To Charles and his family, she gave her youth, but doubts over her husband's loyalty ate away at her, causing destructive jealousy.
I was writing my first book in 1981, and I actually used Charles and Diana as an example of a relationship and how you would judge that relationship astrologically. It was a textbook for young astrologers. And I found the more I looked at these two charts, the more incompatible they were. And I voiced a lot of concerns in this book. I suggested that there would be marathon icy silences in the halls of Highgrove. And I talked about Diana making a bid for freedom and saying, well, divorce at one time would be unthinkable for a member of the royal family, but perhaps not. You know, I definitely thought divorce was a real possibility with these two.
In 1986, the year of these posed holiday photos, the royal marriage entered its terminal phase. Diana asked astrologer Penny Thornton for advice.
One morning, out of the blue, the telephone rang, and this voice just said, "Hello, it's the Princess of Wales." She just wanted to know if there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So it was when I realised that she was in trouble, that this wasn't just someone who was just wanted to have a look at their horoscope, which a lot of people do, is kind of self-indulgent trip. I thought, right, she's in trouble. Well, I'll drop everything. And I did. I dropped everything and saw her a couple of days later. When I arrived at Kensington Palace and I sat down and I started to talk about the charts and looked at Charles and everything, when she finally told me the dire straits they were in, it was an extraordinary thing, because at one time, on one level, she knew I predicted it, and yet I was surprised to hear my own prediction. You know, it was the reality of it was quite something, and it was. She was in a very severe state of distress at that particular time.
Herself the product of a broken home, Diana wanted to protect her young children from the emotional turmoil she had suffered. She felt threatened by the royal establishment, which she described as the enemy. Diana leaned very heavily on her astrologer for guidance.
One of the difficult jobs you have as an astrologer is communicating the information that you can see. And you really do have to judge what you should say and how you should say it. So I was capable of judging at that time that Diana wanted to know that her marriage would work and that she would live happily ever after. So it wasn't, at that time, I felt appropriate for me to say, I don't think this marriage has got a hope in hell. But really to give her suggestions as to how to manage her relationship better with Charles, because she was doing certain things that were guaranteed to send him skedaddling off in the opposite direction. So I spent a lot of time talking about how they could make it work and how things could improve, and giving her a lot of a feeling that she could handle things. One of the things that happens, and was certainly happening to Diana, is when people feel helpless, powerless. It's a terrible, what do you do when you feel you have no power over a situation? It's a terrible spiral to get into. So what you have to do is turn that around so that the person, i.e. Diana, can feel as though she does have power. She can do something. There's actually something she can physically do with the situation. And the minute she had some guidelines as to how to start to chip herself out or get herself out of this spiral, she recovered quite. I mean, by the time I said goodbye, I was dealing with someone who felt back in charge again. She was definitely felt she had something to grip onto.
Diana turned to a series of male companions. The art dealer Oliver Hoare offered guidance, but became embroiled in a scandal involving unsolicited calls to his home. James Gilby, an old friend, was the man in the infamous squidgy tape scandal, and England's rugby captain Will Carling allowed his friendship with Diana to create a rift with his wife. They later divorced. Diana's most notorious affair was with Guards officer James Hewitt, who came to enjoy his reputation as Diana's lover.
She started seeing Hewitt around about the same time as Charles got back with Camilla. Now, obviously, that was convenient all round, especially as far as the so-called enemy were concerned. And it's obvious that the palace knew she was seeing Hewitt.
For 5 years, James Hewitt made Diana's broken marriage bearable.
Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Were you unfaithful?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him.
When their personal life had failed, Charles and Diana were obliged to play their part in royal pageantry, their coldness now scarcely concealed. Resigned to the fact that his marriage to Diana had been a disaster, Charles turned his back on his young wife.
The sad thing is that he was so indifferent to Diana that I don't think he would have minded if it had been a road sweep or something, because I think that, well, perhaps it would have given him more ammunition to be critical of her. I don't think he cared. And of course, indifference is one of the worst things in a relationship.
It was at the time of Prince Andrew's wedding in 1986 that Charles and Diana's marriage had, in Charles's own words, irretrievably broken down. Although Fergie's wedding day seemed perfect, the new Duchess of York, an old friend of Diana's, was unsuited to royal life and would make many mistakes. Oblivious to her new sister-in-law's shortcomings, Diana had manoeuvred her friend into the royal life as her ally and to divert attention away from herself.
Diana is the most manipulative woman I think any of us has seen in all our lifetimes. She has very carefully worked out exactly what her own role is, how far she can go, and she's used Fergie to an enormous extent to go in and test the waters.
Foolish and feckless, the Duchess of York was the subject of scandals. Her reckless disregard for royal convention had a cumulative damaging effect upon the monarchy. She had a love affair with her flashy American financial advisor John Bryan, infamously caught sucking her toes by a Riviera pool. And another with his friend, the handsome Texan oil man Steve Wyatt. Fergie's antics merely acted as a smokescreen for Diana's unhappy marriage.
Diana went away to spend a weekend in a country mansion with a young man when no one else was staying in the house, long before Fergie went away with Steve Wyatt. Diana was in there testing the waters. She knew what she was going to do. Fergie misbehaved in public before Diana did, but Diana had already done it. This pattern of behaviour that we saw come from Fergie, I don't think we'd have seen if Diana hadn't been around.
Friendly rivals, Fergie and Diana kicked against palace restrictions, engaging in behaviour which led to their downfall and expulsion by divorce from their privileged positions.
There was a close relationship between Sarah and Diana. They were chums and they really were close. They had each other. But then that relationship soured as Sarah seemed to be getting on better and the Queen was much more affectionate towards Sarah. Then I think that caused a certain split between the two, and I think a lot of things went on that weren't terribly good news for a friendship, if we put it that way. But then they came back together again towards about the time of 1992, when Sarah was wanting to end her marriage to Andrew, and there was this kind of, the two of them together had this great scenario that maybe they would do it at the same time and make their bid for freedom. So they would buoy each other up during this time, and so they came together again. So it's like that. It's a convenient friendship, but probably the only close one in the royal family.
The divorced wives of Windsor, mothers of the Queen's grandchildren, are inextricably linked by their past, present and future. They know how much the other suffered at the hands of a dynasty, which ultimately expelled them as rebellious failures. Away from the relaxed atmosphere of a Caribbean holiday, Diana's willful and uncooperative side, known so well to Charles, is often on display when she faces the press. Her truculence and unwillingness to pose or smile on occasions that do not suit her has led to unseemly clashes. Trying to live two conflicting lives, Diana strives to attain maximum publicity for her limited public role and virtual obscurity for her private life. Even on holiday, the cameras follow her.
Oh, I'm getting lost. Please.
Diana feels a victim, persecuted and harassed, but she loves the limelight. Only one thing is worse than being constantly photographed: not being photographed at all.
The greatest trick Diana ever pulled was convincing the world that she is the victim, because now everybody believes it.
Diana's determination to give paparazzi photographers a hard time can lead to farcical situations, such as this incident at the end of a holiday in Spain.
Suddenly all seemed to get silly when Diana got hold of this tennis racket and put it up in front of her face. I was walking backwards, and at one point I was trying to focus. The tennis racket had Prince Extender written across the front of it, and I thought this was a really funny picture, so I was trying to focus on the Prince bit, and I didn't realise that I'd stopped to focus, and this Prince Extender was getting closer and closer and closer, and suddenly my lens just went black when she just bumped into me, and I said something like, "Oh, sorry," which seemed really silly, considering the situation we was in. So I carried on walking backwards. I was aware that there was a door behind me. I suddenly realised it was a lift, that we were going into a lift. I was walking backwards into a lift. And this hand just grabbed my shoulder. And I knew it was Diana. And she just pulled me out of the lift. And I immediately jumped in after her. And then this BA official just said, "Out, out, O-U-T, out.
Out, out, O-U-T, out. Have a nice trip now."
which I thought was really, really funny, because when we were kids, my dad used to say out, O-U-T-T, out. And I remember feeling very endeared to this guy.
Sometimes Diana's sullen attitude is evident on her way to engagements, where she can expect to be photographed but refuses to cooperate.
Diana uses the press. If you see a decent picture of Camilla Parker Bowles in the paper, then as sure as God made apples green, the following day you will get an even better one of Diana.
Diana stole Charles's thunder the day he appeared in a television documentary admitting his adultery with Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles. This startling TV revelation had made headline news until he was upstaged by his glamorous wife.
And everybody remembers the night of the Dimbleby interview when Prince Charles admitted an affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. Look how Diana turned up at the Serpentine Gallery. I mean, my God, that was just brilliant. I applauded her for it. I thought it was great. But that's just, you know, that's what Diana does. She manipulates, and she's very good at it.
Diana stunned onlookers with her low-cut Cinderella-style dress, clearly enjoying her celebrity status. However, there are times when Diana shares fears common to ordinary women, particularly when she's out on her own.
I'd found her car parked near Beecham Place, and I was walking kind of fast on the other side of the street, and she kept glancing over her shoulder at me, and she increased her pace. This wasn't the Princess of Wales being harassed by the paparazzi. This was a lone woman in a dark back street in London being followed by a man dressed in black. But I realised that it was quite frightening for her, so I said, "Mum," and she turned around and she went, "Oh God, it's you." It was the only time that I've ever had a decent conversation with Diana, and my God, she can turn it on like you've never seen. I've never been face to face with such beauty at that close range. I've never seen such eyes. And the way Diana talks, when she talks to you, she's not as tall as me, she's slightly smaller than me, but she sort of moves her right hip and puts her head down, and it literally pulls you into her, and you feel like you're being pulled in. And she just said, I said, "Look, I'll see you around," and she said, "Not if I see you first."
Posing alone in front of the Taj Mahal was one of her cleverest tricks, sending out a message of frustration at her husband's absences and at his private disregard for her. However, she did treat her foreign tours with a solemn purpose, remembering the importance of representing Britain abroad. She often did this against a background of sniping criticism from faceless enemies at home, who feared that her glamorous style raised her profile higher than her husband's. Diana could be courteous and respectful of other cultures, yet always allowing her own mesmerizing qualities to come through. Because of this, Diana was received with genuine warmth in places where other members of her husband's family might not have been. It is little wonder that Diana wanted to be an ambassador for Britain, to use well the acclaim she received. As Princess of Wales, she showed skill and diplomacy many politicians would envy, building bridges and cementing international friendships along the way. She has travelled far from her first tentative public speech to the people of Wales in 1981, when she was already expecting her first child, Prince William.
I look forward to returning many times in the future. And also, I'd like to just add how proud I am to be princess of such a wonderful place.
Years later, with great maternal pride, Diana took William to Wales on St David's Day, presenting him as the future king. William's role provides Diana with her greatest expectations, and he may be the best hope for the future of the British monarchy. Prince William and his brother Harry have given Diana the emotional support to carry her through her worst years. They are the real source of her strength. She has strived to bring them up differently from the formal manner of earlier royal generations. By providing a series of adventurous thrills, Diana has tried to give them exposure to people and situations far removed from Charles's own upbringing. However, Diana's obsession with press intrusion has affected William. Finding the paparazzi's coverage of their ski trips overwhelming, William has now refused to return to the scenes of his mother's battles with photographers.
Excuse me. Could I ask you to respect my children's space?
Yes, sir.
Because I brought the children out here for a holiday.
Right.
We've had 15 cameras following us today. As a parent, I want to protect the children.
A lot of the time, Diana shouts and screams at the press when her children are there for no reason. And she actually draws attention to herself.
A schoolboy at Eton College, William is deeply sympathetic to his mother's difficulties. Diana's interview on television revealed a lot about her private life. Being caught in a war between his parents is the fate William shares with many children of split homes. Diana's turbulent public dramas are something the teenage prince has come to dread.
I was in the high street and I saw Diana's car pull in to the schoolyard where William's house is. And it was odd because she didn't get out of the car. All the kids were at church. Church ended and William came out of the church. He walked past Diana's car and she called out to him. She got out of the car and said, "William, William." It was an incredible scene because William was visibly upset and she was trying to explain to him, and it was as if he couldn't grasp it. And I was taking pictures of them, and I really was amazed by what I was seeing. And then afterwards, William just walked away. A detective once said to me at Eton College that William dreads hearing his mum's car on the gravel because it just means more trouble, and that she races up there every time. Every time there's another disaster is coming in the news of the world, you know, a Will Carlin, an Oliver Hoare, a James Hewitt-style disaster. Up she goes, straight up the M4, see the kids, tell them before the papers tell them.
By giving her sons lavish holidays in exotic locations, Diana could be accused of sometimes spoiling her children. Perhaps Diana is overcompensating her sons for the distress of their parents' bitter separation and divorce.
I think that Prince William has understood it for a great number of years, too long in a way, because he was very disturbed and unhappy at the time of the breakup and the divorce, and became very protective of her. And this is going to be interesting, because that bond is probably just going to be stronger and stronger.
Diana's compulsive need to be the most important influence in her boys' lives has led to jealousy of anyone she thought trying to supplant her maternal role. Diana was furious when Charles's friend Tiggy Leg Burke formed a close but short-lived attachment to her sons.
Prince Harry appears to be a more easygoing little fellow, but he too has suffered another loss, in the sense that first of all his mother is ousted, and then Prince Charles moves in Tiggy Leg Burke to be a sort of substitute nanny mother figure, and now capriciously she's been fired, she's out of his life, so he's lost, well, he sees his mother of course, but he's lost two sort of stable presences in his life. And I think very disturbing for those little boys.
Diana's lack of direction in life and her unfulfilled emotional needs could place a burden on her sons at times when they will need a more solid foundation for maturity.
I actually think that children find it much more comfortable if mummy or daddy remarry, because as they grow older, these boys, they want their mother to be happy, but they don't want her to be too dependent, and that is it's a dangerous syndrome as they get older. So it would be ideal if she met Prince Charming #2. It'd be a weight off their minds, and somebody that they liked, rather than this lonely, beautiful, shadowy figure wanting to share their life rather too much.
Enjoying a holiday in the sun with her family, Diana will try to avoid her mother's pitfall of a second failed marriage, which would be disastrous for her and disappointing for her sons. Diana is not destined for a life in the shadows, unlike her mother. Diana's enemies long forecast that she would copy her mother Frances, nicknamed the Bolter, when she left Diana's father for another man.
I think she's a sad lady. I think that she needs a bit of attention. I think she needs a lot of love. Things haven't gone well for Frances Shankidd.
While Diana and her mother may have shared similar destructive experiences, Diana will hopefully not be destined to share her fate.
Like mother, like daughter, except Diana is so much more powerful, so much stronger. Diana is able to cope with it. Mrs. Shankidd is not a good coper.
In recent times, Diana has looked to another good coper, her former stepmother Rain, now divorced from her third husband.
She used to call her stepmother, you know, the stepmother from hell. But somehow now that she herself is divorced and a woman on her own, those two meet and have very cosy, giggly lunches in the Ritz.
Despite virtual isolation in her remote Scottish home, Frances keeps in regular contact with her children and grandchildren. Diana now understands both her mother and stepmother better.
Well, I think both relationships are on the mend. I mean, that's what's quite interesting. But again, this comes with growing up oneself. By the time you've had children and you're going through perhaps some difficult times with your own growing children, you start to have more sympathy and understanding for the mother who may have had all her own problems and at the time that you were growing up, or Diana was growing up. So I think as she grows older, the difficulties that there were in the early stages of the relationships with both her mother and with Rain will be eased. I think with age comes understanding and forgiveness and all those good things.
Diana's circle of staff and women friends has changed rapidly. Some former close friends have gone, and a more recent addition to Diana's diminishing circle is Jemima Khan, the young wife of cricketer turned politician Imran Khan.
I don't think she has formed much in the way of relationships with other women since the divorce. I think that her circle of friends has just shrunk and shrunk, and other women do have a problem identifying with her and knowing how to handle her. I would think Diana needs friends more than anyone else on this planet that I can think of right now.
Pursuing her Queen of Hearts role, Diana identifies with needy people, projecting her caring image and a need for physical contact.
Hugging has no harmful side effects. If we all play our part in making our children feel valued, the result will be tremendous. There are potential huggers in every household.
It's this tactile style that has marked Diana out from the more reserved royal family she married into. Giving love is still her trademark. The plight of starving children does not go unnoticed by Diana. Like so many celebrities, she has used her fame to attract attention to their desperate state. Diana has always done it her way. In Zimbabwe, she ladled out some of the food herself, earning the nickname Di the Dinner Lady. This compassionate touch contrasts with Charles's worthy but unimaginative campaign. This is simply not the style of the House of Windsor. While her enemies regard her as uneducated and her efforts to help others as stunts to upstage Charles, Diana continues her mission to spread love and peace. Before divorce removed the title Her Royal Highness, Diana enjoyed some government support. Now cut off from organisational help, which smooths her progress, Diana battles on. By visiting the killing fields of Angola, Diana is able to draw the world's attention to the millions of unexploded landmines, still taking their toll on the young and innocent in a country trying to pick itself up from a long and bloody civil war. Her efforts were criticised. She was called a loose cannon.
I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world.
Public success takes its personal toll. Diana constantly seeks new horizons, new projects, new people to help, while neglecting her private happiness.
Simply because she is an impossible lady to deal with. It was described to me that she is never relaxed, she never lets go, she never can go out and enjoy herself. She's always thinking, should I be making this move? Should I be doing that? Should I be being photographed? Should I be in a hospital? She very rarely goes out to eat these days. She eats most of her meals in the palace. She hasn't been on a shopping spree that we know of for some time. She's not even been to the Caribbean for weeks. Loneliest woman in London, I would think, without any shadow of doubt, the loneliest woman in London. I think that she spends a lot of time behind palace walls looking at what she can do in the future, and I think she's quite desperate to find a role for herself.
Are there wilderness years ahead for Diana, or will she find a new role and new happiness before her son William becomes king? Princess Diana last visited Sydney in 1988 with her husband for the bicentenary celebrations. This is her first visit to Australia as the divorced wife of the heir to the throne, and there's an air of expectancy about the place. Lord Archer, who has advised her at some of the most critical moments of her public life, believes her appeal is undiminished by her altered status.
We're talking about a superstar here. She's immensely popular worldwide. She's a highly attractive woman and comes over to the man and the woman in the street as a caring, decent person. And there's no getting away from this. You can't suddenly invent her the next day and say, nobody loves her, we don't care any longer. I think the problem is that Princess Diana will live to 90, and this isn't going to go away.
Today, that level of interest has not changed. The crowds still turn out to see her, talk to her, touch her. She's returned to the country she once toured in triumph as future queen. When she came in 1983 with Prince Charles, her appeal was one of the strongest weapons in the palace armoury. The House of Windsor did not hesitate to show off the young princess to the former dominions, Australia, New Zealand and Canada, where the Queen is head of state. In her Panorama interview, Diana said of the 1983 visit, "We had a 6-week tour, 4 weeks in Australia and 2 in New Zealand. By the end, when we flew back to Britain, I was a different person. I realised the sense of duty, the level of intensity of interest, and the demanding role I now found myself in. That demanding role was already taking its toll on the young princess. She was suffering from postnatal depression after the birth of William and from bulimia, an eating disorder. 13 years later, and now fully recovered, Diana, Princess of Wales, is a woman in her prime. Elegant, glamorous, an unequalled wearer of fabulous gowns, composed, in control, and very popular.
Shout for her, go on.
Despite her divorce from Charles, Diana still hopes to become a roving ambassador for Britain.
What she wanted, what she has striven to achieve over the last year, is to be allowed to go around the world and represent Britain in the way she has represented Britain in the past, but with the support, knowing that there would be the support of the government to help organise trips and so on. That hasn't been forthcoming. It's been a consequence of the divorce, therefore, that she's done her trips on her own, privately, individually.
Back in 1983, the Waleses were immensely popular. Who could have guessed that their marriage had been anything other than a love match? It was a message that the royal family and their courtiers were keen to convey. The warmth which greeted the princess enhanced her husband's image. Together, Charles and Diana were a dynamic partnership. Underneath, Diana was learning to cope with insuperable pressures while still full of doubt and lacking self-esteem, the root cause of bulimia which blighted the marriage. Had William been left in Britain, Diana may have been unable to cope with this long separation from her newborn son. However, Malcolm Fraser, the Australian Premier, arranged a temporary base for William so that Diana could be close to her baby. But on a trip to Canada later that year, Diana was compelled to leave William behind. The pressure on her was mounting, her suffering kept under cover. Asked on Panorama if she had felt she had to perform, Diana said, "I was compelled to go out and do my engagements and not let people down." In turn, the public supported her, carrying her through the difficult times. But bulimia had taken over her life. On a tour of Expo 1986 in Canada, Diana fainted in public. She had been surviving on a diet of Mars bars. Charles was embarrassed by her failure to maintain royal decorum. Diana's bulimia had its roots in an unhappy childhood. As a child, Diana had grown up next door to the royal family at Park House on the Sandringham estate. She was a girl much above the ordinary, the youngest daughter of the 8th Earl Spencer. She was the flower of British aristocracy. It seemed a protected, charmed life, but the family split after parental rows. When Diana was 6, her mother Frances left home. The children remained in their father's custody. Diana went to boarding school where she excelled at sport and music, coming home for events such as her sister Jane's wedding to the Queen's Assistant Private Secretary Robert Fellows, a crucial link to Diana's future.
She'd take it all in her stride. I think she'd always be like that. She's very practical, Diana, very down to earth, very practical, very good housewife. And incidentally, when she was a baby, she was a superb physical specimen. She'd won any baby prize there was going.
The Spencers left Park House in 1975 when Diana's grandfather, the 7th Earl, died. Her father inherited the title and a 100-roomed ancestral mansion, Althorp House in Northamptonshire. The Spencer line can be traced back to the Normans and beyond. There are links to Charles II. Diana's family can boast more English blood than the Germanic House of Windsor. The Honourable Diana Spencer became Lady Diana Spencer, entering adult life fully aware of her aristocratic background.
I called my daughter Diana after her, because she's one of the old family names of the middle of the 18th century. There have been links with the monarchy and with the nation as a whole since the 17th century, really, because one of my ancestors was virtually Prime Minister to 3 kings, Charles II, James II, and William and Mary. And ever since then, there have been very close links with the royal family. I mean, Queen Mary was one of my godmothers. Prince of Wales, those days, was one of my godfathers. And my mother was a lady-in-waiting. And now my daughter has married the Prince of Wales.
Becoming Princess of Wales was a dynastic prize. When Diana won it, her father's pride and delight was without bounds. On that glorious July morning, almost none of the world's 750 million television viewers had any idea of the truth behind the wedding of the century. Front row privilege in St Paul's Cathedral was given to Diana's closest friend, Sarah Ferguson, who knew many of her secrets. With Diana's maternal grandmother, Lady Fermoy, were her sisters Jane and Sarah. They knew of Diana's fears the day before the wedding and had comforted her, joking, "Your face is on the tea towels, so you're too late to chicken out now." As mother of the bride, Frances Shand Kidd, still strikingly attractive, returned in triumph to the court which had virtually exiled her after her bitter divorce from Diana's father. Diana's grandmother, Lady Fermoy, a close confidant of the royal family, had serious doubts about Diana's suitability as a royal wife.
Well, she certainly said so to people, yes. But I think that that's the nature of being a courtier, that unfortunately you don't tell your employers what they don't want to hear.
Ever the consummate courtier, Lady Fermoy's loyalty to the royal family, and particularly to her friend the Queen Mother, was absolute. In their minds, Diana was the right choice for Charles.
I think it's perhaps wrong to say it was an arranged marriage. I mean, just because everybody wanted it doesn't mean to say it was arranged. I think the Prince of Wales convinced himself that he loved her. And I think she certainly was in love with him. Whether she was actually really in love with him as a person, or whether she was in love with the whole mystique of him being Prince of Wales, I don't know. She certainly went into it willingly. She was absolutely determined to marry him. I mean, she did know about Camilla, but I think she thought she could win him over. I really don't think anybody would have deterred her. And I think although he did have his doubts, he thought it was his duty and that really she was ideal and he must go ahead with it. I mean, I think she's changed a great deal. And I think it was a great shock for her to discover she couldn't really make her husband love her. And they were actually completely unsuited. I don't know if you remember that interview they gave. And, you know, Prince Charles saying, oh, that she was absolutely perfect and loved the country and all this kind of thing. And, I mean, it turned out, of course, she wasn't like that at all. And so they didn't have a single interest in common.
Some of the central participants knew all was not as it seemed. the bride and groom, his parents, and Robert Runcie, Archbishop of Canterbury, who married them, claimed the wedding was the stuff that fairy tales are made of. Later, he told his biographer that he believed it was an arranged marriage, that the couple were ill-matched, that Charles was marrying primarily to produce an heir to the throne, but he hoped Diana would grow into the role. Both families had achieved an excellent piece of dynastic family planning. The Queen had satisfactorily married off her 32-year-old son, and the divided Spencers had seen their daughter marry into royalty. But saying goodbye to him on a trip to Australia, the sad truth was beginning to intrude on her romantic dreams. The warning signals had been ignored. Diana was left sobbing. Charles had just taken a goodbye call from his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles. From the start, Diana was the focus of much public attention, a foretaste of greater pressures to come. Diana, later accused of manipulating the press, was a recent convert to the game. All that mattered to her then was being part of the dynamic duo, the good team. For Charles, the media was there to serve his interests.
Knowing for years that the camera's poking at you from every quarter and recording every twitch you make. So you can get used to a certain extent, and on those occasions you accept that that's part of it. And I think if you don't try to work out in your own mind some kind of method for existing and surviving this kind of thing, you would go mad, I think. And so in the end you do get used to it, but I don't know, do you find that after the last 6 months you're beginning to get used to it?
Just. It is, I suppose, one of the most important things you're going to have to adjust to, really, isn't it?
Of course, yes.
And Prince Charles has been a great help to you in that
Well,
progression.
a tower of strength.
Whatever support Charles gave was clearly insufficient. One person who might have guided her through the times she now calls the Dark Ages was Princess Grace of Monaco. Based on her own experience of a life under the microscope, Grace took the nervous girl aside and gently warned her, "Don't worry, dear, it will get worse." When Grace died tragically after a stroke which caused fatal injuries in a car crash in September 1982, Diana personally asked the Queen for permission to represent her at the funeral. Privately, Diana was unable to bear the pressures of her life. A few months after her wedding, she threw herself down the stairs at Sandringham.
You have so much pain inside yourself that you try and hurt yourself on the outside because you want help, but it's the wrong help you're asking for. People see it as crying wolf or attention-seeking, and they think because you're in the media all the time, you've got enough attention, inverted commas. But I was actually crying out because I wanted to get better in order to go forward and continue my duty and my role as wife, mother, Princess of Wales.
Diana wanted to remould herself into a visible queen in the making. At the state opening of Parliament in 1984, she appeared with her hair in an upswept chignon, but the publicity eclipsed the serious nature of the occasion. Princess Margaret scolded her, saying, "Don't ever upstage the Queen again." Charles's friends criticised her appearance. Columnist Jean Rook accused Diana of becoming a living, daily recycled Barbie doll. Diana is still nicknamed Barbie by some of the enemy camp. Charles spent more time hunting and playing polo. Diana suspected that this was an excuse to see more of Camilla, as these occasions were written into his diary before any public engagements were added.
Right now, go.
Diana and Charles still put on a show of affection in public. Privately, they behaved with the politeness of strangers.
Queen Alexandra put up with what King Edward VII did, We are living in a different age, and women have different expectations. And so I think it was rather difficult for somebody who wasn't brought up in royal circles to cope with this situation. Very probably if he'd married a foreign princess, she would have just, looked away, turned a blind eye to what was going on, and just regarded it as her duty to keep the whole thing going.
These were turbulent years for Diana. She turned for help to a series of friends, advisors and astrologers. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, recalls in her book My Story that at Balmoral, Diana was teary and reclusive and out of sorts. Diana's father was a vital prop in these difficult times when her marriage was disintegrating. Sadly, he died in March 1992. His funeral was a harrowing occasion for all his family. Prince Charles arrived just in time by helicopter, following an alleged private meeting with Camilla. Earl Spencer had lived on borrowed time after a brain hemorrhage, and seeing William, the heir in line, growing up was precious to him, as he recalled in a television interview.
William was 5 yesterday. I thought of that. I might not have been there, but I was there and able to ring him up and talk to him on his 5th birthday, which was great fun. Great day for him. Great day for him. You send him a lovely present, and maybe he has a happy day. And hope to hear all about it from him later on.
Diana's family history had been marred by feuds. She, her sisters and brother disliked Rain, their stepmother, although today she is one of Diana's circle of strong women friends. Charles did not add his name to Diana's touching floral tribute. His message was attached to a wreath sent by the Queen and Prince Philip. Charles attended Earl Spencer's memorial service with his wife and sons. The show of togetherness was deceptive. Charles had felt obliged to join Diana for appearances' sake at other Spencer family gatherings in the past. On his father's death, Diana's brother Charles became Earl Spencer. He took control at Althorp and later married the model Victoria Lockwood. Prince Charles accompanied Diana to their wedding in 1989. Their marriage ended in separation after the fragile Victoria became unable to cope with her problems. They too fell prey to the Spencer family curse of unhappy marriages. On holiday with King Juan Carlos of Spain and his family, Diana's frailties left her struggling to hide her unhappiness and her bulimia, whilst projecting a happy family image out of duty. Unloved by her husband, Diana found comfort in the arms of a young officer, James Hewitt. His looks are strikingly reminiscent of her father as a young man. Diana's love affair with James Hewitt lasted on and off for 5 years. When she addressed the wives of the Gulf War soldiers in 1991, Diana was thinking of her lover Hewitt, then a tank commander in the Gulf, often in the line of fire.
There is nothing, of course, that I can say which will fill that gap in your lives. And to say that I, along with so many others at home, understand and sympathise with you at this time sounds very inadequate and rather too easy. But it is the least I can do, and I do feel for you with all my heart.
Diana admitted her affair with Hewitt.
Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Were you unfaithful?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him.
Despite what was going on privately in their lives, Diana still obeyed the whims of palace and government, accompanying Charles on foreign tours to fly the flag for Britain and the monarchy. She admitted she had suffered from rampant bulimia in these years. Eating in public, especially a large number of lavish courses at a banquet, put her under particular pressures. But friction in the marriage grew over Diana's escalating popularity. Diana claimed that Charles was a proud man. He found her ascendance too hard to bear, and he ended the double act. Anxious to protect the public from the truth, a propaganda campaign was mounted to discount stories of serious problems. The palace insisted that a marriage which Charles now admits had irretrievably broken down by 1986 was happy and wholesome. Sarah Bradford believes the deception was unwise.
It was much more of a shock once everything came out, wasn't it? But I think that whatever happened, it would have been very bad. Because after all, we all had this fairy tale image, didn't we? And then when the facts came out, I think everybody was really pretty shocked.
It was at a polo match in India that Diana stopped pretending. Expecting to kiss his wife, she deftly turned her head away. The big lie was being exposed. Diana had an ally in her friend the Duchess of York. They had shared many confidences before marrying into the House of Windsor, and as sisters-in-law understood each other's distress. Unknown to the public, they had made a pact to leave their husbands that spring. Both deeply unhappy, Diana and Fergie had resolved to break from palace control and begin afresh in a search for happiness which had so far eluded them. In March 1992, Fergie unceremoniously left the royal family, but Diana waited. She had her secret weapon already primed. A group of friends had told the hidden side of her marriage to the author Andrew Morton, whose book would be published that summer. One of those friends was her former flatmate, Carolyn Pride. Diana attended her wedding to William Bartholomew and became godmother to their son. Carolyn had witnessed the personal destruction Diana's exalted marriage had caused.
When the Morton book came out, so I'm told that the princess's friends talked to Andrew Morton because they felt that the truth should be told about this marriage, that it was a sham. And they all thought, I'm told, that the princess would then leave the royal family and have another life. But this didn't happen. And I don't know whether she looked into the abyss and thought, I don't know that I want to go, that I want to be separated, but I don't want to go. And so she backtracked.
Diana chose to send symbolic messages to reinforce the story she knew would soon be told. She visited the Taj Mahal, where Charles had posed in 1981, shortly before his wedding. She called her visit a healing experience. The dynastic marriage that had been presented to the world as a love story had proved disastrous for both parties. After Diana, her true story, the royal family faced an escalating drama, but with hindsight could have prevented the final act.
I think most of us feel perhaps that they should have been told to get on with it. I think there has been a problem of communication, and I think that people have found it very difficult to, say, tell the Prince of Wales what they think he should do. The Queen's not given to probing into other people's private lives, and that includes the lives of her children. I think she was taken by surprise and very upset that it wasn't working out.
Diana's grandmother, Lady Fermoy, had told others that Diana was an actress and a schemer. She died in 1993 and had been the crucial link to the royal family through her friendship with the Queen Mother. Lady Fermoy had fallen out with her granddaughter Diana over the Morton book, but they were reconciled shortly before her death. The old lady also patched up a long rift with her daughter, Frances, dating from her divorce when Lady Fermoy had testified against her over the custody of the children. Charles genuinely grieved for Ruth Fermoy. She had given him and the royal family the kind of unquestioning loyalty he expected from his wife. After exposing the sham marriage in Diana, Her True Story, Diana suffered reprisals. a tape of an intimate conversation between Diana and an old friend, James Gilby, was made public. Her friendships with other men were also made public. A series of phone calls made to the art dealer Oliver Hall were leaked to the media. Her relationship with rugby player Will Carling became front-page news. Shortly afterwards, he separated from his wife Julia. After the publication of the notorious Camillagate tape, Diana found her role increasingly marginalised as Charles's office orchestrated a relaunch campaign. Following a disastrous tour of Korea in November 1992, the Wales would never again be sent abroad as joint representatives for Britain. John Major brokered a deal whereby the warring couple would live separately, but would preserve the official side of their union. He hoped that with arrangement, Diana could still become queen. The princess still appeared with the royal family at important events such as the state visit of the King of Malaysia. This is the last time Diana joined the House of Windsor for such an occasion. Her potential as a great queen consort, all too sadly evident. Diana has said in her own words that in her marriage 3 was a crowd. And the dominance of Camilla Parker Bowles had grown to the extent that Charles was prepared to place his affair with her in the public domain. Charles's cooperation with Jonathan Dimbleby for a candid television interview and biography took the princess and the palace by surprise. Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage? Yes, absolutely. And were you? Yes, until it became irretrievably broken down. Diana's decision in December 1993 to withdraw, at least temporarily, from public life climaxed with a dramatic speech which she planned to make at a charity function. The palace and the Prime Minister's office manoeuvred behind the scenes to make sure she was stage managed as smoothly as possible. Her friend Lord Archer's role was to steer her through this traumatic event.
We got her on stage at the end of the meal, and I introduced her, and I simply said, Her Royal Highness Princess of Wales would like to make a statement. And she was trembling, and she was very, 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 the whole thing was.
Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, would like to make a short statement. Your Royal Highness.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here with you, sharing in your successes of the past year. When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. At the end of this year, when I've completed my diary of official engagements, I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far. Obviously, I attach great importance to my charity work, and I intend to focus on a smaller range of areas in the future. Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with hopefully a more private life. My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born. I would like to add that this decision has been reached with a full understanding of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who have always shown me kindness and support. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years. I couldn't stand here today and make this sort of statement without acknowledging the heartfelt support I've been given by the public in general. Your kindness and affection has carried me through some of the most difficult periods, and always your love and care has eased that journey. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I mean, this was pin-dropping stuff, because they hadn't been expecting it. They'd come to celebrate a charity function. They hadn't expected a constitutional announcement. And they burst into thunderous applause. And I could see her trembling.
Your Royal Highness, I know I speak for all of us when I say we sympathize with the decision you have taken. Whatever course your life now takes, be assured there are many charities and individuals all over the world who will remain grateful for the dedicated service and care you have brought to everything you do. On behalf of those people who cannot be with us today, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales.
Lord Archer took control of the situation.
Follow me, ma'am. Walked down into the audience, and she just followed. And they remained standing and cheered her all out of the room. Took her back to the palace, and I remember leaving the palace, I don't know, 20 minutes later, thinking, God, poor woman. She's gone through all of that, and now she's on her own. And no one there at all. I mean, no one. It's not as if... I mean, I suppose some people who read stories about princesses think there are hundreds of people running around getting food and turning on televisions and bringing people in to meet her. There was one man, who I think was called the Equerry, and he left at 6. So she's in this great big house, all on her own, and I remember going back to my wife and saying, you know, wouldn't it be lovely to take her to dinner? Of course we can't. You can't ring up a princess and say, would you like to come to dinner? But I remember that evening vividly, thinking she must be very lonely, and then I reported what had happened during the day back to the Prime Minister, and that was the end of it. And she, in her typical good manners, she's a beautifully mannered woman, sent a handwritten note round here the next day with a small present, saying thank you for taking care of me during the day. Again, typical of her beautiful manners.
Diana returned to public life the following year. The need to honour the brave and the dead of World War II meant that she took her place with other royals on commemorative occasions. Seen behaving with respect and dignity at these sad remembrances, alongside the Queen, there is a sense of loss. Diana is the Queen that never was. The Queen had persuaded Diana to stay within the royal family after the Morton book. The official separation was meant to be permanent. However, 3 years later, the Queen changed her view. Divorce was inevitable. This shocked Diana when it was eventually announced.
I don't want a divorce, but obviously we need clarity on a situation that has been of enormous discussion over the last 3 years in particular. So all I say to that is that I await my husband's decision of which way we are all going to go.
Diana did not agree to a divorce until February 1996, when she could no longer continue defying the Queen, whose letter sent in December had the private force of a royal command. Diana told friends she felt under pressure to get out.
Well, I don't think she was removed from the royal family. After all, I think she removed herself. Although perhaps in the end she changed her mind and didn't want to get divorced, and I think made it plain that she didn't. Over the years, I think she'd given the impression certainly that she wanted out. And I think, as always in these divorce situations, who wants to make the first move? Because the person who makes the most move has to pay the most usually.
I think that's perfectly true. She didn't want a divorce. She saw no need to divorce. She felt that the separation status gave her a position still. It was important to William and Harry. Everything Charles and Diana have done has been for William and Harry, and there was therefore no need to rush into a divorce.
I mean, I think that most people thought, to be quite frank, that the Queen should have banged their heads together long ago and said, well, you know, there you are, you must get on with it. After all, we're not talking about two people who live cheek by jowl in a tower block and have no personal space. Plenty of room for that. So the trouble was, it just went on until it was poisonous.
As part of her divorce settlement, Diana received £15 million. At their final meeting, she dissuaded Charles from having a note-taker present. She told him she had always loved him, she had no regrets about marrying him, and she was agreeing to a divorce against her wishes.
She was an asset we could never have dreamed would be so good. And you see it when the crowds turn out and their reaction to her. I think most people, and I may be wrong, but my reading is that most people are very sorry about the divorce. They're very sad about the divorce. They would have liked that to go on. They would have liked them to go on as Prince and Princess of Wales.
With the divorce, hopes of Diana becoming Queen ended. She had claimed that the establishment she married into saw her as a non-starter for Queen. Her huge pulling power abroad did not secure her future at home.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country.
If she doesn't want to be queen, she doesn't want to be queen. You could say that she doesn't like the idea. I personally would have thought she'd be rather good at it, just as she's been extremely good at being a Princess of Wales.
In 1992, and still an official member of the royal family, Diana appeared on the Buckingham Palace balcony for the last time. On her divorce, the Queen removed the title, Her Royal Highness. It was an unpopular move.
As the mother of a future king, she should be accorded the title HRH, Her Royal Highness. Others decided that it was not to be, but it looked more and more like an act of punishment, really, for the way the princesses behaved. Diana, of course, indicated at the start of the process, back in February 1996, that she would be willing to give up her title because she felt she was taking a back seat from now on. But I think she always hoped that it would never come to that. I think she felt that she needed to have that title, principally, as I say, for Prince William and Prince Harry's sake.
Once you are divorced, you are, after all, no longer a real member of the family, are you? In anybody's family, this is true. And therefore, you no longer, in their view, have the right to that title. But I think that it did appear petty. And there is also the problem of her being the mother of the future king. And so some people thought that it would have been better to have left the HRH.
When she heard that she would no longer be Her Royal Highness, Diana cut over 100 charities of which she was royal patron or president. Her presence will be sadly missed, and her love and affection will never be replaced.
It meant an awful lot to the status she felt of her charities, and it was because of that, the removal of the title, that in fact she decided to cut so severely back on all her charity work and her charity commitments.
The campaign for a better understanding of AIDS also found a sympathetic supporter very early on. Diana was not afraid of controversial issues. Public concern and confusion about the facts had been growing. But pictures like this did more than 1,000 reassuring words from doctors. Now officially out of the royal family, Diana's future role is uncertain. On a private trip to Argentina, she had hoped to improve relations with Britain. Some felt that she lacked the diplomatic training and experience for such a mission, no matter how well she was received. Without a formal role, Diana's foreign trips can leave her open to political wrangling. This was the case when Diana accompanied her friend Jemima Khan to her husband Imran's hospital in Pakistan.
There are problems. I mean, there was that business when she went to see Imran and Jemima Khan in Pakistan and got very involved in politics. She didn't mean to. But simply by the act of going to see them, that was regarded as a political act in Pakistan. So she's not really wise enough in the ways of diplomacy to get herself along in those sort of situations.
Diana's international acclaim is particularly evident in the United States.
This is one of the nicest British invasions that the White House has ever had. It's because she is a woman who has had a tireless commitment to the homeless, to AIDS, cancer, leprosy, and other health issues.
Hillary Clinton is one of the strong women who give Diana inspiration. As her life changes, Diana has moved into a new circle of friends, women with international experience. One is Lady Elsa Boker, the widow of a British ambassador. Her diplomatic advice is invaluable to Diana. Another discreet friend is British-born magazine editor Liz Tilburis, her constant companion in New York. Divorced and stripped of her title, Diana is still treated in public like royalty, although many close to the royal family see her as an outlaw, an inconvenient woman now cast aside by the most powerful family on earth.
I don't think she has a great deal of contact with the royal family, but of course she cannot isolate herself totally from them, and she's always going to be part of them because of the mother of William and Harry. So she will still be seen, albeit increasingly rarely, I think, with the royal family on certain state occasions when William and Harry are there too. But there isn't a great deal of contact. There really doesn't need to be. I don't think they want a great deal of contact with her, and she doesn't want a great deal of contact with them.
For Diana, Christmas and Easter will mean separations from her children, who spend those holidays with the Queen, who is grooming William for kingship.
I think that he'll be properly trained. And I think that, well, you know, if you have that position, you have those privileges, you just get on with it.
On his accession to the throne in years to come, William might restore the title HRH taken from his mother on her divorce.
Maybe Prince William one day, King William might feel differently. And it's in his power so to do, because the king or the queen is the fount of all honour, and therefore they can do what they want where this is concerned.
Every man she's seen with is viewed as a potential husband. Diana's personal life is often the subject of conjecture.
had to be Lord Mega Rich Wonderful, wouldn't he? It is very difficult, because how does any man cope with being Mr. Princess Diana? It's a terrific problem for her.
She had an unhappy first marriage. She'd like to make a very happy second marriage. Perhaps she'd like to have another family. But I don't think she's going to rush into it. I mean, this has been... It was an extraordinary marriage for her, an extraordinary experience, and it took an extraordinarily long time to get out of when it all went wrong. So I suppose next time she's got to try and pick the right man, and as she has said herself, she's always been a very bad picker.
Diana's role has been snatched away. She has no husband and no official duty. She is a woman alone, a survivor of misfortune, whose message of hope is intertwined with a renewed belief in herself. Following her success since divorce, there is a chance that the royal family will realize the value of their lost princess and draw her back into the theatre of monarchy. Diana, Princess of Wales, was divorced and all but discarded by the royal family, yet she remained one of the most popular and admired women in the world. Seemingly intended to take the royal family into the 21st century, she looked destined to follow in the footsteps of the Queen Mother as Queen Consort of Britain and the Commonwealth. But Diana was unable to cope with the turbulence of royal life, and she temporarily withdrew from her public duties.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with hopefully a more private life.
Equally unable to stay in the shadows, Diana's retirement was brief. Public adulation had become a powerful substitute for the warmth and affection she found lacking in her marriage. Refusing to go quietly, Diana still deployed her beauty and glamour to devastating effect. She was a limelight stealer of legendary proportion. Her charisma has ensured that she will not be a footnote in history, as her enemies intended. Once our future queen, she will be remembered for her special appeal. To many, she was a princess in her own right, one whose charm eclipsed the family who had rejected her as a non-starter for queen. A princess alone, she rarely met her former in-laws, and even rarer did she appear relaxed with them. Disillusioned by her experience of royalty, Diana turned away from their traditional style. At Viscount Linley's wedding to the heiress Serena Stanhope, Diana's individuality underlined her difficult position, neither totally in nor out of the royal family. On such occasions, she and they tolerated each other. Then Diana would go her separate way and withdraw once more into the seclusion of her three-story apartment at Kensington Palace. Here, in the echoing emptiness of a palace that was never truly a family home, she tried to dispel her loneliness.
She obviously wanted it to be a family home because it was very much the centre of her life with the boys, particularly obviously when they were back from school. It was much more really like a young single woman's apartment than what you would think of as a rough and tumble family home.
Diana's future rested on her position as mother of the royal heir and spare, her sons William and Harry, her power base amid the uncertainties of her future. A year before her death, the title Her Royal Highness was taken away from her.
It was very interesting that her brother said at the funeral service she didn't need the royal title to continue to go on producing her special sort of magic. And I think from the outside world, that was obviously the important thing. I suspect it may have been very much more important to her than we on the outside realised.
In stripping Diana of the title Her Royal Highness, royalty lost one of its star performers. Diana's combination of regal dignity and Hollywood allure outshone the staid and formal House of Windsor. This was the last occasion she would join the royal family at a state banquet. Her power to outshine a glittering array of tiaraed and titled heads created undercurrents of rivalry and jealousy which marred Diana's short reign as a queen in waiting. Diana rebelled against her husband and his family, which resulted in her eventual divorce. Deprived of the life she should have had, Diana rejected Queen Elizabeth II's style of monarchy and created for herself a symbolic role.
I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country.
How was it possible to compensate a princess for the loss of her identity? Charles had made a generous divorce settlement worth then about £17 million. Diana had amassed so many sumptuous gowns as Princess of Wales that recently she decided to auction some for charity. Each breathtaking dress was valued for being worn by the woman who was once wife of the heir to the British throne. Diana's wardrobe was vast. When stored, her dresses apparently spanned the width of 10 average terraced houses, and she had a 7-foot rack just for her blouses. She kept the Aladdin's cave of jewels that marked every public triumph and private tragedy of her 16 years as Princess of Wales. Daughter of an English earl, Diana was wealthy in her own right. With her Spencer Family Trust Fund and her private collection of jewels and memorabilia, Diana may have been worth £40 million. Whether they cost £2,000 or £10,000, her gowns were not chosen for their price, but for their bewitching effect. Diana's beauty and glamour was a constant reminder to Charles that the crowds were casting him aside in favour of his more attractive wife.
As time went on after they were married, it was quite clearly the crowds wanting to see Diana. And I think there are pieces of film where you see, in a sense, the crowd on the side of the road where Charles was actually disappointed because it wasn't Diana who was coming over to talk to them or shake their hands. I think it would have been difficult for anybody to cope with, but particularly somebody like the Prince of Wales, who'd been brought up to believe that in every way he was the preeminent figure as the heir to the throne, and to be upstaged by somebody, particularly somebody who must have seemed very much the junior partner, I would have thought would have been very threatening.
Diana followed the pattern of other rich and underloved wives. Her response to her husband's treatment was to spend, 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 and he, like other dissatisfied husbands, grudgingly paid the price. Diana joined the ladies who lunched, frequenting smart restaurants in an effort to fill the lonely hours while Charles was busy elsewhere. In fact, Diana's favourite shopping area, Kensington High Street, became known locally as Kensington Die Street.
I don't think that the money was that important. It was the loss of prestige. It was the awful humiliation of the thing going wrong, because remember what a fairy tale marriage it all was. Disillusioning for us and, above all, for her.
Starting out with her fiancé in 1981, Lady Diana Spencer could never have guessed the treacherous road ahead. Her naivety matched her readiness to please. Hidden was the magic that would turn her from a shy teenager to a global enchantress.
She was a child, a Sloane Ranger of 19, not terribly well educated. I mean, she always herself would admit that the best prize she had at school was for having the finest groomed guinea pig. But she was very fragile, I think, then. And she was 20 when she married the heir to the throne, 21 when she produced, first child. It was an awful lot to cope with. They thought she was going to be a sort of biddable creature, wearing slightly frumpy but acceptable clothes, and smiling and bowing and accepting flowers, but really not doing anything else, and bearing an air and despair. But instead, of course, she was this stunning success. And it was very difficult for Prince Charles because the whole thing had got completely out of control. And, you know, I think he regretted it terribly. I mean, had she stayed behind the scenes, maybe they'd be married still today.
In looks, Diana was like her mother, Frances Shand Kidd, who was divorced acrimoniously by Diana's father and then lived in virtual exile with her second husband. The loss of her mother from the family home was one of the early causes of Diana's troubled personality. Diana's destiny was shaped by a sense of abandonment. Mothering her younger brother Charles developed Diana's caring side. Her eating disorder, bulimia, began when Diana was a teenager, in imitation of her older sister Sarah's problem with anorexia. Later, as Prince Charles's fiancée, she succumbed secretly to her old eating habits when pressures began to mount, facing the most intensive public scrutiny.
Her brother said at the funeral that part of the problem was her own deep sense of insecurity and her deep sense of lack of self-worth. And of course, to those people who saw her mostly in public can hardly believe that, but I'm sure he was right. I'm sure it was true, and I suspect that all stemmed from their very difficult childhood, which was very insecure and did make them both feel very unhappy and rather lost at times. Although undoubtedly the pressures which she felt in the marriage would have contributed at a later stage.
Charles's lack of understanding of Diana, 12 years his junior, sharpened the divisions between them. She wanted a romantic marriage. His needs were more pragmatic.
I suspect, given his background and given his upbringing, that he would have had a much more formal approach to the idea of marriage and the idea of a royal partnership than perhaps she did as a very romantic young girl who fell in love with somebody who she saw as her Prince Charming as well as the Prince of Wales at a very vulnerable and presumably very unformed age. I mean, she was only 19, just out of the school. And I suspect she had different expectations perhaps than he did.
Diana quickly learned to pretend. Even on her honeymoon, she covered up her doubts and private fears.
Diana was still very young. She'd married Charles with very, very little experience and had come from a very shaky background where the main nurturers in her life had abandoned her one way or the other, so she was enormously emotionally needy. What used to happen was when she felt Charles was drifting away and not connecting, you know, when she was perhaps unhappy or she needed to talk to him about something, instead of doing it and letting perhaps a little bit of breathing space to come between them, she over-demanded. She demanded his attention. She wanted him, and the more she grabbed his attention and the worse the stunts became, the emotional stunts to get his attention became, the further he went away.
He wasn't used to people answering him back. He wasn't used to, in particular, to women telling him what they thought, and he just turned his back on it and got out of the place. He just moved on. And I don't think he ever tried, but he was just perplexed. He couldn't understand someone who, having been told what to do, didn't do it.
The volcanic private relationship between the Prince and Princess of Wales finally erupted in 1992. On their last joint tour, they embarrassed their Korean hosts by their negative and hostile conduct with each other. Nicknamed the Glums, they were never allowed to repeat this pantomime performance, which prompted private Foreign Office apologies to Korea. The couple separated, but still Diana feared leaving the Royal House of Windsor, to which she had given so much, as she explained in a TV interview.
I don't want a divorce, but obviously we need clarity on a situation that has been of enormous discussion over the last 3 years in particular. So all I say to that is that I await my husband's decision of which way we are all going to go.
There are just so many things that contribute to the breakdown of a marriage. You simply can't say it was one thing. It was the jealousy. And remember, two people make a contribution to a marriage splitting. And Diana made a lot of attempts to talk to Charles, to try to make their relationship work, even suggesting that they did things together at one point. She did a lot of work to try to make the marriage look better than it was, and it was Charles's feeling that it was hypocritical to appear in public or to do these little gestures that would make it seem all right. His belief that he should remain true to him, true to what was going on, was actually also part of the reason it kind of gathered momentum. And it may be, again, when we look at the intense media interest, I mean, any of us having a relationship difficulties, if we read about it every day, I think we'd all go galloping towards the courts a lot faster than if we were left, you know, to get on with how we might try to make a relationship better.
Diana's shameful friend, her bulimia, was a constant presence during these years. On an official visit to Canada, she lived on a diet of chocolate bars and needed medical attention when she fainted during a visit to Expo 86. Charles failed to recognize his wife's condition, forcing her to keep up royal appearances when she needed rest and recuperation and understanding. During their gatherings at royal residences such as Sandringham, family tensions made Diana's illness worse, resulting in cries for help.
So you have so much pain inside yourself that you try and hurt yourself on the outside because you want help, but it's the wrong help you're asking for. People see it as crying wolf or attention seeking, and they think because you're in the media all the time, you've got enough attention, inverted commas. But I was actually crying out because I wanted to get better in order to go forward and continue my duty and my role as wife, mother, Princess of Wales.
The vows she had made on her wedding day were sincere. To Charles and his family, she gave her youth, but her husband's love for Camilla Parker Bowles caused destructive jealousy.
If you read, for example, the biography of the Prince of Wales, she was, in a sense, aware of the possibility of this other relationship, even when they were engaged.
In 1986, the year of these posed holiday photos, the royal marriage entered its terminal phase. Diana asked astrologer Penny Thornton for advice.
One morning, out of the blue, the telephone rang, and this voice just said, "Hello, it's the Princess of Wales." She just wanted to know if there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So it was when I realized that she was in trouble, that this wasn't just someone who was just wanted to have a look at their horoscope, which a lot of people do, is kind of self-indulgent trip. I thought, right, she's in trouble. Well, I'll drop everything. And I did. I dropped everything and saw her a couple of days later. When I arrived at Kensington Palace and I sat down and I started to talk about the charts and looked at Charles and everything, when she finally told me the dire straits they were in, it was an extraordinary thing, because at one time, on one level, she knew I predicted it, and yet I was surprised to hear my own prediction. You know, it was the reality of it was quite something, and it was. She was in a very severe state of distress at that particular time.
Diana turned to a series of male companions. The art dealer Oliver Hoare offered guidance, but became embroiled in a scandal involving unsolicited telephone calls to his home. And England's rugby captain Will Carling allowed his friendship with Diana to create a rift with his wife. They later divorced. Diana's most notorious affair was with Guards officer James Hewitt, who came to enjoy his reputation as Diana's lover. For 5 years, James made Diana's broken marriage bearable.
Did your relationship go beyond a close friendship?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Were you unfaithful?
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him.
When their personal life had failed, Charles and Diana were obliged to play their part in royal pageantry, their coldness now scarcely concealed. Resigned to the fact that his marriage to Diana had been a disaster, Charles turned his back on his young wife.
The sad thing is that he was so indifferent to Diana that I don't think he would have minded if it had been a road sweeper, because I think that, well, perhaps it would have given him more ammunition to be critical of her. I don't think he cared. And of course, indifference is one of the worst things in a relationship.
For comfort and support, Diana turned her attention to her charities, who welcomed her with open arms.
Hugging has no harmful side effects. If we all play our part in making our children feel valued, the result will be tremendous. There are potential huggers in every household.
It was this tactile style that marked Diana out from the more reserved royal family she'd married into. Giving love was her trademark. She always cared about the disabled. Abroad, she turned her attention to people afflicted by leprosy. These people were all part of her constituency of the rejected, as her brother said so movingly at her funeral.
Doctor.
Diana's philosophy mirrored that of Mother Teresa and her nuns, who worked tirelessly for the sick, homeless and underprivileged. Sadly, Mother Teresa died within days of Diana. She, like millions all over the world, had been touched by Diana's warm and caring personality. Diana was using her charity work to compensate for her loveless marriage. It was at the time of Prince Andrew's wedding in 1986 that Charles and Diana's marriage had, in Charles's own words, irretrievably broken down. Although Fergie's wedding day seemed perfect, the new Duchess of York, an old friend of Diana's, was unsuited to royal life and would make many mistakes. Oblivious to the shortcomings of her new sister-in-law, Diana manoeuvred her friend into the royal life as her ally and to divert attention away from herself.
There was a close relationship between Sarah and Diana. They were chums and they really were close. They had each other. But then that relationship soured as Sarah seemed to be getting on better and the Queen was much more affectionate towards Sarah. Then I think that caused a certain split between the two.
With the publication of the Duchess of York's life story, the relationship with Fergie came under considerable strain.
They had had some estrangement, which was about the various aspects of Sarah's publicity about her book and so on and what she'd said in her book. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Diana was fiercely concerned about people's loyalty to her, and I think again that might reflect her own insecurity at a basic level. She was one of those people for whom you were either with her or against her. It was very difficult, I think, for many people to tread a middle path or perhaps to be loyal to two people who she saw as one of them being her enemies. I've known several instances of people who were good friends of hers who did feel very loyal and concerned about her, but with whom she was very angry because she saw some action of theirs as being disloyal.
Diana's truculence and unwillingness to pose or smile on occasions that did not suit her led to unseemly clashes. Trying to live two conflicting lives, Diana strove to attain maximum publicity for her limited public role and virtual obscurity for her private life. But even on holidays, the cameras followed her.
Come on, get lost.
We got your recommendation.
Go on, get lost. lost.
S'il vous plaît, monsieur.
Thank you.
Oh.
Please.
Diana felt a victim, persecuted and harassed, but her use of the media was always an area of both confusion and controversy in her life. At times, her apparent awareness of photographers and the press was then blighted by her naivety at the eventual outcome.
She knew what she was doing when she rang individual columnists and told them her side of the story. She knew what she was doing when she posed for very beautiful photographs or sexy photographs in different locations where, even though the newspaper photographers might not be immediately apparent, she knew they were at the other end of a long lens. But on the other hand, I think she wasn't really in control, because she was very upset when they then said, well, you know, you've in a sense opened the door to this. Why are you so incredibly miserable when we chase you around to your health club or your tennis game or with the boys or whatever it may be? And she didn't really understand how she couldn't play both games.
Diana's determination to give paparazzi photographers a hard time could lead to farcical situations.
Suddenly all seemed to get silly when Diana got hold of this tennis racket and put it up in front of her face. I was walking backwards, and at one point I was trying to focus. The tennis racket had Prince Extender written across the front of it, and I thought this was a really funny picture, so I was trying to focus on the Prince bit, and I didn't realise that I'd stopped to focus, and this Prince Extender was getting closer and closer and closer, and suddenly my lens just went black when she just bumped into me, and I said something like, "Oh, sorry," which seemed really silly, considering the situation we was in. So I carried on walking backwards. I was aware that there was a door behind me. I suddenly realised it was a lift, that we were going into a lift. I was walking backwards into a lift. And this hand just grabbed my shoulder. And I knew it was Diana. And she just pulled me out of the lift. And I immediately jumped in after her. And then this BA official just said, out, O-U-T, out.
Out, O-U-T, out. Have a nice trip, ma'am.
While Diana resented such intrusions into her private holidays, she was acutely aware that her role on official occasions, like a visit to India, required a more regal image. Although they had a marriage in name only, as Princess of Wales she accompanied her husband on official visits. At home and abroad, she was the essence of royalty. On another visit to India, she posed alone in front of the Taj Mahal, her solitude sending out a message of her frustration at her husband's absence and his private disregard for her. Even alone, she treated her foreign visits with a solemn purpose, remembering the importance of representing Britain abroad. She often did this against a background of sniping criticism from faceless enemies at home, who feared that her glamorous style raised her profile higher than her husband's.
Ma'am, what do you think of the wall paintings?
I think the clarity of it is exceptional. Really quite extraordinary.
Diana would be courteous and respectful of other cultures, yet she always allowed her own mesmerizing qualities to come through. Because of this, she was received with genuine warmth in places where other members of her husband's family might not have been. As Princess of Wales, she showed skills and diplomacy many politicians would envy, building bridges and cementing international friendships along the way. She had travelled far from her first tentative public speech to the people of Wales in 1981, when she was expecting her first child, Prince William.
And to its capital, Cardiff. I look forward to returning many times in the future. And also, I'd like to just add how proud I am to be Princess of such a wonderful place.
In 1973, at the age of 12, Diana followed her two sisters to West Heath School in Kent, where the order and routine provided a sense of stability. Established in 1865, its small country house environment has always encouraged the development of individual talents. Her ties with West Heath School remained strong. In 1987, she returned to give a speech and open the new sports hall. It was an appropriate task for someone who had excelled as an athlete and accomplished swimmer. Despite a naturally quick wit, Diana was not good at exams, and she didn't stay on for the final year.
My years at West Heath were certainly very happy ones indeed. I made many friends who I often see, and in spite of what Miss Rudge and my other teachers may have thought at the time, I did actually learn something. Though you would never have known by my O-level results.
Years later, with great maternal pride, Diana took William to Wales on St. David's Day, presenting him as the future king. William's role provided Diana with her greatest expectations, and he may be the best hope for the future of the British monarchy. Prince William and his brother Harry gave Diana the emotional support to carry her through the worst years. They were the real source of her strength. She strove to bring them up differently from the formal manner of earlier royal generations. By providing a series of adventurous thrills, Diana tried to give them exposure to people and situations far removed from Charles's own upbringing. At her funeral, Diana's brother pledged that his family will do all they can to continue the imaginative way in which she was steering her two exceptional sons, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as she planned. Diana's obsession with press intrusion affected William. Finding the paparazzi's coverage of their private ski trips overwhelming, William later refused to return to the scenes of his mother's battles with photographers.
Excuse me. Could I ask you to respect my children's space?
Yes, sir.
Because I brought the children out here for a holiday.
Right.
We've had 15 cameras following us today. As a parent, I want to protect the children.
Right.
By giving her sons lavish holidays in exotic locations, Diana could have been accused of sometimes spoiling her children. Perhaps she was just overcompensating her sons for the distress of their parents' bitter separation and divorce.
I think that Prince William has understood it for a great number of years, too long in a way, because he was very disturbed and unhappy at the time of the breakup and the divorce, and became very protective of her.
Enjoying a holiday in the sun with her family, Diana tried to avoid her mother's own pitfall of a second failed marriage, which could have been disastrous for her and devastating for her sons. Unlike her mother, Diana was not destined for a life in the shadows. Diana's enemies long forecast that she would copy her mother Frances, nicknamed the Bolter, when she left Diana's father for another man. Despite virtual isolation in her remote Scottish home, Frances kept in regular contact with her children and grandchildren. In her final years, Diana understood her mother better.
This must have been the most awful blow to her, because she's obviously had a very difficult life herself, and I imagine she must feel at some level that some of the problems that have occurred go right back to the stage at which her marriage to Diana's father broke up. I imagine that she would want to be close to them, but whether that's possible, given that she lives geographically so far away in Scotland, I don't know.
Diana's father was a vital prop in the difficult times when her marriage was disintegrating. Sadly, he died in March 1992. His funeral was a harrowing occasion for all his family. Prince Charles arrived just in time by helicopter, preoccupied with other duties. Earl Spencer had lived on borrowed time after a brain hemorrhage, and seeing Prince William growing up was precious to him, as he recalled in a television interview.
William was 5 yesterday. I thought of that. I might not have been there, but I was there and able to ring him up and talk to him on his 5th birthday, which was great fun. Great day for him. Great day for him. You would send him a lovely present, and maybe he has a happy day. And hope to hear all about it from him later on.
Diana's family history had been marred by feuds. She, her sisters and brother disliked Rain, their stepmother, although later she became one of Diana's strong circle of women friends. Charles didn't add his name to Diana's touching floral tribute. His message was attached to a wreath sent by the Queen and Prince Philip. Charles attended Earl Spencer's memorial service with his wife and sons. The show of togetherness was deceptive. Charles had felt obliged to join Diana for appearances' sake at other Spencer family gatherings in the past. On his father's death, Diana's brother became the new Earl Spencer. The Princess of Wales continued with her royal commitments, but not for long. Diana's decision in December 1993 to withdraw, at least temporarily, from public life climaxed with a dramatic speech which she had planned to make at a charity function. Her friend Lord Archer's role was to steer her through this traumatic event.
We got her on stage at the end of the meal, and I introduced her, and I simply said, Her Royal Highness Princess of Wales would like to make a statement. And she was trembling, and she was very, very, the whole thing was.
Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, would like to make a short statement. Your Royal Highness.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here with you, sharing in your successes of the past year. When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. At the end of this year, when I've completed my diary of official engagements, I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far. Obviously, I attach great importance to my charity work, and I intend to focus on a smaller range of areas in the future. Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with hopefully a more private life. My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born. I would like to add that this decision has been reached with a full understanding of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who have always shown me kindness and support. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years. I couldn't stand here today and make this sort of statement without acknowledging the heartfelt support I've been given by the public in general. Your kindness and affection has carried me through some of the most difficult periods, and always your love and care has eased that journey. And for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I mean, this was pin-dropping stuff, because they hadn't been expecting it. They'd come to celebrate a charity function. They hadn't expected a constitutional announcement. And they burst into thunderous applause. And I could see her trembling.
Your Royal Highness, I know I speak for all of us when I say we sympathize with the decision you have taken. Whatever course your life now takes, be assured there are many charities and individuals all over the world who will remain grateful for the dedicated service and care you have brought to everything you do. On behalf of those people who cannot be with us today, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales.
Follow me, ma'am. Walked down into the audience, and she just followed. And they remained standing and cheered her all out of the room.
Diana's retirement was brief. Unable to return to an ordinary life, she began to create her own role against a backdrop of charity work and good causes. Through her association with the Red Cross, for instance, she successfully raised their profile over many important campaigns. Here, she was making a visit to Nepal in the Himalayas. As an ambassador for Britain, she was unequalled.
She was an extraordinary ambassador for us to the third world, what we used to call the third world, to people in countries who were suffering from one thing or another, which she identified with at home, but which she picked up very strongly when she was abroad, whether again it was AIDS in Africa or the plight of children who she visited with Mother Teresa in India, or the whole landmines issue where she was so important in identifying and drawing attention to something which governments have been talking about for a long time, but no one in general had remote interest in.
By visiting the killing fields of Angola, Diana was able to draw the world's attention to the millions of unexploded landmines still taking their toll on the young and innocent, in a country trying to pick itself up from a long and bloody civil war. Her efforts were criticised. She was called a loose cannon.
Yeah, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world.
A year after her divorce, Diana was full of hope for a happy future. She took her boys on a holiday to the French Riviera with the businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed and his family, including his son by his first marriage, the handsome bachelor Dodi. The happy group cruised on his luxurious yacht, the Jonicle. Diana ignored Dodi's reputation as a playboy and was impressed by his gentle, considerate nature. They spent further time together and their friendship rapidly developed into love. He gave her the attention and tenderness she craved. Diana's brother said she had found joy in her life, and days before her death, she told a friend that her time with Dodi was pure bliss.
She certainly looked very radiant and very happy, even in the smudgy, long-distance photographs we saw of her on holiday. I think the fact that she was prepared slightly later to be photographed with Dodi Al-Fayed in a way which she certainly hadn't been with some of the other supposed male friends in her life did indicate that she felt confident about the relationship and therefore presumably felt very happy. But whether it was the kind of relationship would have developed, I don't know. We hear all the rumours in the press that they were going to be engaged, but I think that's just in the realms of speculation.
Death came suddenly and terribly after a crash in Paris. Charles brought his ex-wife home to a country in mourning. Half the world watched by television, and millions lined the streets of London for a funeral unlike any other. The public grief for the death of the People's Princess dictated the nature of a unique funeral for a unique person and asked the monarchy to reconsider its position.
I think it would be impossible at this stage to gauge what will happen over the long term, but I think what has been fascinating is to watch the way in which perhaps the country felt differently about something than the Queen and those who immediately surrounded her. Not so probably so much in personal feelings, but in terms of the way of expressing those personal feelings. And she responded. She responded to what she must have heard, either through the media, through her advisors, through the Prime Minister, whoever it may have been, who advised her that she was out of step with the country's feelings on this. And she, of course, responded magnificently and did a wonderful broadcast. And I think most people felt that that, in a sense, restored the position.
Diana, Princess of Wales, died when she had at last found the happiness that had eluded her for most of her 36 years. She had spent a summer of love with Dodi Fayed, a handsome and affectionate man who gave her the attention and tenderness she craved. Just as their future looked bright and promising, death came suddenly and tragically. Now the world will remember Diana, the irreplaceable princess who became, as she had wished, a queen in people's hearts. Spring 1998, a visit to Canada and a time to laugh again. This was the first appearance of the Wales trio. They had found light after the awful darkness of Diana's death. It was a time for relaxation as they skied the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Charles & Sons were the latest family firm. William, who once hated photo calls, now bantered with reporters.
Harry is the best skier, is that true?
I don't know about that. We might have a family argument.
At Balmoral in August 1997, on another photo call, just prior to their mother's death, the differences between the two boys' personalities were emerging. Harry was the more impulsive, William already a cautious young man. the living image of his mother, he faces a lifetime of duty.
For William, whatever happens to the monarchy, life is always going to be like it is for his mother. Hounded, harassed, pursued, privately as well as publicly. His misfortune as well as his good fortune being that he looks rather like her, and he's her legacy made flesh.
William was already on the threshold of manhood, but Diana's death has brought out qualities of leadership and responsibility in him.
He has become a very strong young man. He was always strong, much stronger than his father, who is rather weak and who tends to blame other people for things that go wrong in his life. William was strong of mind when he was a boy, perhaps even a bit willful. Since his mother died, and particularly with Harry to look after, to oversee, he's assumed an importance which he wears very well. I mean, he happens to be, tall, he's a good-looking chap, very bright. But he changed in becoming a more independent boy, in taking control, in a sense, of the situation. And he was crucial, of course, to Harry's stability.
Shortly after Diana's death, Charles took Prince Harry to South Africa. In Johannesburg, they attended a Spice Girls concert. Harry relished the attention they gave him. It was a time to laugh and smile again, and to let his father join in the fun. South Africa was a long way from Britain in climate and culture. The trip was an opportunity for father and son to relax in a different atmosphere. The tour helped Harry create a geographical and emotional distance from the traumatic events since his mother's death.
He's become far more reflective. There are long periods, I understand, where he is very sort of contemplative in a way that he wasn't before. Well, he's only a young boy. I think all of us who have families and maybe have lost someone close can understand what may be going through his thoughts, disappointments. He must have periods of unhappiness, but he is quieter and more contemplative than he was before she died.
Like William, Harry can never forget the good times they had with their mother. She introduced them to new people, exciting places, and fresh adventures. A visit to watch a Welsh rugby match, and a chance to drive an army tank in Germany were part of Harry's upbringing. She never wanted second born to mean second best.
In a conversation I had with the princess not long before she died in Kensington Palace, she did bring up the question of her concerns for Harry, in that William would always be the one, the centre stage one who was going to be king. She was worried, for instance, rather touchingly, I thought, that William would get all the girls. All the girls would go for Wills, and poor Harry, who's only a couple of years younger, would be left out. And so she was already kind of taking steps to try and make sure that they were treated equally, even though in royal standing terms, William would always be number one.
Although she would have loved a daughter, Diana threw herself enthusiastically into the role of mother of two lively boys. She provided them with the thrills and spills that other children enjoyed. This was nothing like Charles's childhood. They raced each other in Colorado in July 1995 and shot down the slides at Thorpe Park another year. Distant summers of their past with their memories of a gentle and affectionate mother will always be in their hearts. But Diana was accused of upstaging her estranged husband and of spoiling her sons with too many lavish foreign holidays.
In a way, perhaps she spoiled them with treats. I don't think you can spoil children with too much love and attention. I think that's a myth. But I found that she didn't spoil them in terms of being a sensible mother. She was very good at nagging them about their manners. And as a result, they're both beautifully mannered boys.
William will be the next Prince of Wales, and Diana knew she had to prepare him for the role. In March 1990, St. David's Day, she took him to Wales to meet people from the Principality. He was only 7 years old. As a mother, Diana was very particular about certain things.
Diana was fanatically tidy, and so she was always reminding them to pick up things. That's the sort of things that mothers do. I mean, that's normal. To have somebody come along and nag you, I think is keeping you in touch with reality. You know, life is not easy, and you have to learn to look after yourself, and I think she gave a lot of that. She was a very well-balanced mother in that sense.
Diana got involved in many humanitarian causes. In 1991, accompanied by her friend Baroness Margaret Jay, she not only challenged prejudiced views about AIDS, but broke the mould of traditional royal speeches.
Publicity about HIV seems to veer between sex and death horror stories at one extreme to complacency at the other. But behind this confused picture lies the reality of a growing worldwide affliction and untold private suffering. HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
In one handshake, Diana dispelled the myth that touching transfers the virus. She made many visits to AIDS centres such as this hospice, with its emphasis on living. Patients welcomed her. On several private occasions, Diana took her sons along with her.
Harry was only 9 years old when he visited Adrian Moore Jackson, who was dying of AIDS. He and William went to his flat to see him. This could never have happened in previous generations. They stayed, talked, and they learned from this. They were being shown things, they were being told things, they were being introduced to people. They were sitting on the beds of patients, playing little games with them. And they were being with AIDS patients and others. And the wonderful legacy that Diana led. And if this drawbridge between the 20th century and the millennium was her, through the children.
Diana also visited hostels for the homeless, such as Centrepoint in London, and talked to the occupants about their problems. She wanted William and Harry to have a social conscience and not lose sight of real life outside palace walls. They visited Centrepoint with her, and William took an early interest in her work for the underprivileged.
She was concerned that they weren't going to grow up spoiled or sort of too much within that tradition. And she used to love taking them to see, the homeless and wear the jeans and just, go down to brass tacks. I mean, she was terribly concerned that they should see that side of life.
She desperately wanted to get them away from the life of privilege which she knew that they were destined to lead for the rest of their lives. She feared they would grow up like Prince Charles had grown up.
She didn't want them to see reality through the polished windows of a passing limousine. She wanted them to know it as she knew it.
Highgrove was the Wales family's country home. Holidays were spent at the Spanish royal summer palace. They watched polo matches with their mother. And there was real excitement when Prince Charles won a trophy. Unlike earlier generations of royal heirs, William and Harry were not educated by a palace governess. They attended kindergarten and mixed with other children. Then they went to Weatherby's, a London day school. Both boys enjoyed games. And their mother joined in too. The reward of a loving hug made it all worthwhile.
Hugging has no harmful side effects. If we all play our part in making our children feel valued, the result will be tremendous. There are potential huggers in every household.
Displays of affection were absent in Prince Charles's childhood. Often separated for months from his mother, he still had to wait his turn for a brief and cool reunion. There could be no greater contrast with Diana. After a brief Canadian tour, she scooped her children into her arms. Charles, too, was far more tactile than his parents had been with him. Diana wanted William and Harry to share the experiences other children enjoyed. While Diana believed it was essential for William and Harry to sample life outside castles and palaces, she was criticised for straying too far from traditional patterns of raising royal children.
She was determined that her boys would not grow up like that. She wanted to keep their feet on the ground, so she used to take them to supermarkets, go shopping, take them to the movies, queue up at McDonald's and at fun fair, leisure parks, all in a desperate attempt to give them some experience of the real world.
Sometimes the real world became impossible for Diana and her children. They were simply too famous. In 1993, a private visit to Disney World in Florida was ruined by other tourists who took pictures and made an amateur video of the royal group. Diana resented these intrusions. Even on public engagement, she hated having to run the gauntlet of pushing photographers who closed in on her. She felt hunted and hounded. Scenes like this seem a terrible omen of her last hours. Above all, Diana loathed the media scrum and the battles with paparazzi when she was out with her sons. The constant attention upset them.
I remember a terrible fight in the street in Austria when William and Harry were caught right in the middle of it. Two Italian paparazzi tried to, really get literally right up their noses. It was ridiculous. They're trying to take pictures from this sort of distance. And Diana objected and got very upset, and her policeman rugby tackled one of the photographers to the ground. Well, the two boys were standing there watching all this, and they became very concerned, and Diana had to hurry them away back to their hotel. Incidents like that, and there have been so many of them, have really traumatised William. Harry doesn't suffer so much. Harry's rather thick-skinned. He's very like his mother. He quite revels in the spotlight and makes jokes about it.
Bodyguards always accompanied the boys on trips, but they were unable to prevent the harassment they received from the paparazzi and sometimes from the public. Unlike other children, William and Harry were always on show. Lines of holidaymakers would stare as if they were exhibits in a zoo. Harry felt uncomfortable. William grew to loathe cameras and would even hide from prying lenses.
William's problems with cameramen are so bad now that they've become a serious worry to the Queen. He doesn't like the spotlight, hates publicity, hates facing cameramen, and I think that's largely because he saw his mother involved in so many scuffles in the street. I remember talking to Diana about this once and saying, she said, "Oh, William doesn't like being photographed," and I said, "Well, I'm sorry, it goes with the job. If you're going to be a king, you've got to be photographed." She said, "Oh, you're very hard." And I said, "Well, I think I'm just being realistic. The sooner William gets accustomed to photographers, the better it's going to be easier for William."
Hello.
Diana tried to protect her children from press intrusion, sometimes by taking direct action.
Excuse me. As a parent, could I ask you to respect my children's space?
Yes, no problem at all.
Because I brought the children out here for a holiday.
William doesn't like the cameras because he saw the appalling things it did to his mother. So much is said about Diana and photographers, about photo opportunities being created out of nothing so that she could be photographed. The reality is that she hated being pursued by cameras.
This incident at Malaga Airport in 1994 shows the type of hounding that Diana resented and William hated.
William saw this. He sympathised with his mother. He even said to her once, "I'll be a policeman when I grow up and I'll look after you." So, again, we are talking here about the teachings of a child. And when a child sees and feels something that powerful when they're young, as William did, it's not a surprise to me that he has grown up feeling an antagonism towards lenses which are looking at him. Hopefully he'll get over it. After all, you know, as an adolescent in moving into manhood, he's going through that rather difficult period. But he does hate cameras. He's going to have to get used to them. They're always going to be there.
On state and ceremonial occasions, William and Harry accepted they would be on display. They appeared on Buckingham Palace balcony each June to watch Trooping the Colour with the rest of the royal family. In 1990, they watched the ceremony that commemorated the Battle of Britain, a lengthier test of endurance for the royal children. Honouring the brave was very important to the Queen. Younger royals found such occasions boring. 6-year-old Harry and his 2-year-old cousin Princess Beatrice performed an impromptu quick step. Diana had to remind him that he was in public. William copied his older cousins, Princess Anne's daughter Zara and her son Peter, who had been drilled in royal etiquette early in life. After church at Easter and Christmas, the royal family were on parade for the crowds and the cameras. Diana felt under pressure to make her lively young boys conform to the standards of the senior royals. As heirs to the throne, she was training William and Harry for public service, showing them how to greet people who had waited hours in the cold to see them. Diana's special touch with ordinary people was a gift her sons have inherited each in his own way. Harry grew into an impish, adorable child. William grew conscious of his special destiny and was more reserved. There were family examples of dedication to the monarchy all around him. In October 1991, when William was 9 and Harry 7, they accompanied their parents on a visit to Canada, their first official visit as a family. Diana had taken the lead in preparing them for this first formal introduction to representing the monarchy abroad. She had no idea that this training would help them respond to public sympathy after her death. Despite images of unity, Charles was distant from his family. Diana and her boys were often apart from him. She tried to make up for his absences.
Diana really loved her boys. Some people say she almost smothered them when they were little, but because her marriage wasn't working, she put all her emotions and love into those 2 children. It's a very common thing. And she used to take them into bed with her, and she'd hug them and kiss them, and they'd sit and watch television with her. And if they were ill, she would go into hospital with them. I mean, she really was a very good mother. And anyone else that intruded on her space as a mother, she didn't like.
As they sailed from Canada on the royal yacht Britannia, the Prince and Princess of Wales were visibly ill at ease. Aboard Britannia 6 years earlier, the story appeared to be a happier one.
When she started to speak with us about her problems in the marriage, I think one of the big blow-ups when Prince Harry was born, because obviously I sent her flowers and many of the friends, and then I said to her once, how happy you must both be, and she said, can you believe it? He was very disappointed with when Harry born, and because he wanted a girl. And we all started to smell that something was going wrong, and then eventually everything came out.
William and Harry were often formal with Charles and more casual with Diana. They learned to balance the divided lives and different lifestyles of their parents.
Especially at the time of the separation and the divorce, I think as all children do, not wanting to alienate either side, And okay, in some respects, they were slightly the go-betweens. And yet, they always were very careful not to upset Diana by mentioning things they knew would upset her. And they always said, "Daddy loves you."
William grew attuned to Diana's emotions amid the turmoil of his parents' disintegrating marriage. As years went by, he became her confidant and often comforted her in her distress.
On one famous occasion when she was weeping and had retreated to her bathroom after an argument with Charles, arguments, incidentally, they desperately tried to keep away from the children, as all parents would, and they were no different from anyone else in this respect. He memorably stood at the door, heard her crying, and shoved tissues under the door for her to wipe her eyes. And he was about 9 at the time. I mean, it's the most poignant thing. It is awful. We all know that children suffer most in these circumstances.
Oh no. Oh, that's better now. Splendid.
Despite a painful broken arm in 1990, Charles played with young Harry at Highgrove, but he and Diana were now living separate lives. She had secretly cooperated with a biography that in 1992 shook the royal world. She allowed her friends to take the blame, but Charles knew she had betrayed him. Diana would never be forgiven.
He thought it was despicable what Diana did, but I think in a way he understood why she did it. She felt, I'm surrounded by enemies, I'm a lone woman fighting the establishment, I've got to use every trick in the book, and she did.
Diana kept up the pretense, continuing to appear with the royal family on special occasions. It was 3 years before she admitted the truth in a controversial television interview that finally resulted in her divorce.
She wasn't thinking about her children, particularly when she did that Panorama interview. That could only be damaging to the boys. I think at the time she wasn't aware of what she was doing. She would never have deliberately harmed them. But just the same, it was a mistake, and it was something she said she regretted later.
Diana didn't stay silent for a particular reason. She feared that if she remained silent, she would ultimately lose the children. Her outburst was in order to keep the children, and she took a calculated risk. I think the risk has been proven on all sides to have been the right one, in the sense that the kids have come through it pretty well. They're two fine boys, and for them to be fine boys still is enormously to their credit.
Among the royal family are several male role models for William and Harry to look up to. Perhaps the best is Princess Anne's son Peter, a handsome rugby player now studying sports science at university.
They really look up to him as a hero, as an elder brother, and William in particular, and to a certain extent Harry, get on very well with Peter Phillips. And whenever they go to Balmoral, they like Peter Phillips to be there when he can be, just because he's like the big brother that they didn't have, that Wills didn't have, and they look up to him.
Diana was a mother to be proud of. She gave her boys unquestioning love and attention, whatever the problems in her personal life or the demands of her public role. While there were many wonderful trips to expensive locations, she also taught them about the humanitarian causes she campaigned for, including AIDS, leprosy, cancer, and landmine victims. Diana's enemies ridiculed her good intentions, whether in her charity work or with her children. She was frequently accused of courting the media and rivaling her husband with photo opportunities of herself as the better parent.
If they competed for the love of their children, it was like all divorced parents. When holidays come around, they both try to give them great treats. Well, for instance, you know, that is the fantastic advantage of having a broken home. You get 2 lots of presents at Christmas, you get 2 lots of holidays, so it's not all bad.
As her marriage broke up, William and Harry became Diana's male escorts for some evening engagements. She took William to Wimbledon to see Steffi Graf become ladies' single champion in 1991. and to Cardiff, the Welsh capital, in 1993. But William was happiest in the seclusion of the royal estates.
She knew that the best time William had was when he was away from London, away from the paparazzi, on the royal estates where he could be shielded from all the publicity. And she knows, or she knew, that he liked things like shooting and riding and all the country he-man pursuits that royal men enjoy, and that she couldn't provide, living in an apartment which is virtually like a flat in London, with no garden to speak of. So they were much better off with their father, and she accepted that.
Diana often took her boys out of London to see close friends such as Lady Annabel Goldsmith at her large home in nearby Richmond.
There were various homes, just using Annabel Goldsmith's home as an example. They would phone up and say, I mean, she would phone up and say, oh, do we fancy coming down for a Sunday lunch? We've got about 10 or 12 people coming with their, with their children. Oh, Diana would love that. Great, get in the car, let's go. And they had a great time there. The boys fooled around with the other boys, who were all the children who were and girls, roughly the same sort of age. And it was just a fun Sunday lunch.
That's a good positioning from Prince Charles. He leads there and he picks up.
Polo is a game for right-handed players like Charles. William is left-handed and cannot follow in his father's sporting tradition. While his elder son excels at swimming, as Diana did, Charles has high hopes for Harry.
Harry is quite sporty, and I think it's very likely that if he's right-handed, he'll play polo, perhaps because his father will like him to play polo. Charles is a man who likes family traditions to go on.
On the royal estates, traditions involve blood sports.
William especially is like his father in liking field sports. He particularly likes shooting. He shoots a lot. Charles shoots a lot. It's something that Diana was not partial to. And it's one of the things that made William rather more like his father inwardly than like his mother.
Like all the Queen's grandchildren, William and Harry are the products of a broken home. The sad breakdown of their parents' marriage and subsequent divorce was played out in front of the world's press.
You have to remember, because of their tender years, that actually half their lives had been blighted by the public warfare of their parents' very acrimonious divorce. It's tough enough for any kids if their parents split up at that age, but in the case of William and Harry, there was all sorts of public warfare, the dirty linen being hung out a bit too much, friends of Prince Charles, friends of Diana, mutual insults flying in the national press. The schools can say that they hid the newspapers from these boys, but we all know that other school children can be pretty cruel, and it's not always possible to do that. I think both parents, in their different ways, tried to nurse them through each stage, and we know that Diana kept going down to these schools to tell them what was going to happen next before they read it in the papers. But I think it's bound to have left scars on both of them. And it would be surprising if William and Harry, in their different ways, didn't grow up without certain emotional problems that any children who'd been through that at that age would have.
Out of school time was divided between both parents. On holiday at Closters in 1995, William, Harry and Charles made the best of their time together. They were told that peace and relative privacy could be traded for an organised photo call. Their younger cousins, Beatrice, 6, and Eugenie, 4, were also holidaying at the same resort and joined them. Little Eugenie was out of her depth, and 12-year-old William showed the gallantry and leadership that made both his parents so proud of him. The presence of the little girls, the daughters of the Duke and Duchess of York, seemed to make William more relaxed as they faced a barrage of pressmen. He answered their questions with congenial professionalism.
This camera, please.
Who's the best skier of all forward?
Well, improving is very good.
They're improving?
Very good skiers.
Richard, sorry, could you ask round him? Do you hope to have a ski together at some stage?
Yes, it'll be good fun. It'll be very good. Enjoy it.
One more minute and we'll call it off.
Can you look this way?
2 girls. Just put the skis to one side just for a moment. You can just bend down, that's it. Nice and close together if you can, please. 2 girls.
Victory in Japan was commemorated in 1995, one of several occasions when William and Harry had to behave like adults. To please the Queen, they joined their estranged parents in a show of royal unity. Harry, nearly 10, found it difficult to concentrate and looked to his parents and older brother for guidance. William, 13, had already learned to cope with the pomp and pageantry that marks so many royal occasions. Just 2 years later, William and Harry would have to cope with the untimely death of their mother. After 5 years at boarding school, William started Eton College in September 1995. Eton was chosen for its close proximity to London and Windsor Castle. Charles refused to send him to the Scottish school Gordonston, where he himself had been very unhappy as a student. Eton had educated Diana's father and brother. Now the school will help prepare both William and Harry for the challenges of a monarchy into the new millennium. Diana sought William's approval before sending him there.
She treated him like a grown-up, which is what every teenager longs for. She'd ask his advice, say, well, William, what do you think about this? Should I do this or shouldn't I? Now, that is very flattering. And she didn't tell him what to do. I mean, Prince Charles is exactly the same. I've heard this for several years now, that whenever they decide that they're going to go somewhere or do something, or there's going to be a photo call, they say, well, we were thinking of doing this, what do you think, William? And they also ask Harry. And they ask for their input.
Diana identified in William personal qualities lacking in his father. While she actively groomed her elder son to be king, she also shared many private confidences with him.
She did drop an incredible amount of responsibility on William's very slim young shoulders. He was, barely 10 years old when she started revealing how she felt in front of him. And I think, as a result, William's matured very fast. He's much more mature than most boys of 15. But that's also perhaps because of the daunting burden that lies ahead of him, the monarchy. And when you're 15, you might want to be a rock star or a nuclear physicist. You don't want your life mapped out for you. Kids of that age want to feel free. All their school friends are talking about, I'm going to backpack around Africa or something, and he doesn't have that choice. It's very sad. I've heard Prince Charles talk about how awful it is to have your whole life mapped out for you, and I know William's a very sensitive boy, and he'll have absorbed a lot of that and think, oh, I've got the same fate awaits me, sitting around waiting for my parent to die so I can become king.
William's confirmation service in March 1997 was the last time the 4 members of the Wales family were seen together in public. Diana and Charles had agreed to act in harmony for the sake of their children, who had suffered from their parents' all-too-public divorce. By this time, Diana had resolved to leave behind the bitterness of the past and had forged a new friendship with her former husband. With her generous divorce settlement, she was seeking an independent life. She felt relaxed enough to kiss Charles goodbye at William's speech day in May 1997. They would never be seen in public again together. While holidaying in the south of France in summer 1997, Diana fell in love with Dodi Fayed.
It's been reported that when the first pictures of Diana and Dodi in that sizzling embrace in the Mediterranean were appearing in the press, Diana rang William and warned him, tipped him off that the pictures are about to appear. And his reaction was fine. He just said, look, Mum, whatever makes you happy. He was called a mum. And, he was fine about it. He knew Dodi. He'd met him on the holiday they all shared in the middle of July.
Diana and Dodi had 2 further holidays without her boys. On the warm Mediterranean Sea, she made plans for a bright new future, perhaps even for marriage.
Diana would have never married Dodi without the consentment of the 2 children, and Prince William more than that, because she always said that Prince William was her anchor. and she admired the boy enormously.
They cruised the Mediterranean aboard the luxurious yacht Johnny Carl. William and Harry witnessed Diana's budding romance.
But the children, don't forget, she took them on the boat and they had a wonderful time. Not probably William. William was not so happy, but the little one was thrilled, all the games, all the thing. And it was probably to accustom them to the situation. And when I asked her, are you going to marry him? And what's your children's reaction? She said, Elsa, I rang up William. So it was the answer. And he said, Mommy, I want you to be happy.
My understanding is that they felt that their mother was being claimed rather too much before their very eyes. It may well be that they'd never been up close with their mother and a romantic friend before in the way they were on holiday with Diana and Dodi in Saint-Tropez. So it may be that they were just seeing something that, because their father is still very much alive and they're very fond of their father, they found rather uncomfortable, made them feel rather uncomfortable. But they did not like him very much. That is what the people close to them say, and that is what I believe.
On the last Saturday in August, Diana and Dodi had dinner together at the Paris Ritz. Shortly after midnight, they left to make the brief journey to Dodi's apartment, where he had a diamond ring awaiting his princess. Pursued by paparazzi and driven too fast, they crashed in a Paris underpass. Diana died in hospital. In the new life she was embracing, she had exercised the previous one and dismissed its wiser safety precautions.
Had she been with the boys, of course, she would have been completely differently protected. She would have had a royal protection driver, very well trained by police methods. She would have had probably a follow-up car, making sure that the paparazzi were at a distance. But of course, one part of her deliberately didn't want that, and she did very much feel liberated from many of those constraints in her private life when she gave up being Her Royal Highness and having the trappings of royalty. So, as on many things, she herself was ambivalent. There were moments, obviously, when it would have been very helpful to have proper police protection, but there were other moments when she really wanted to escape, and I suspect that the second one, when she wanted to escape, were more important than the first.
Millions of flowers were left outside Kensington Palace, Diana's London home. On the evening before her funeral, William and Harry went there with their father to see these touching tributes. They were amazingly composed and seemed to draw strength, as their mother had, from the love of ordinary people. Diana never knew how well she had prepared her courageous sons in dealing with the public at such a difficult time. Bravely, they thanked the crowd.
Charles. Shut up. Charles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
William. William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, hold on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
William, we love you.
Love you!
These brave boys won the admiration of their own family and the rest of the world. Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, became a prominent figure after her death. He spoke from his South African home of the sister he had lost and of her grieving family.
Good morning. I'm just going to read this statement. All those who've come into contact with Diana, particularly over the past 17 years, will share my family's grief. She was unique. She understood the most precious needs of human beings, particularly those that suffered. And her vibrancy and sparkle, combined with a very real sense of duty, are now gone forever. It is heartbreaking to lose such a human being, especially when she was only 36. Above all, my thoughts are with William and Harry, and with my mother and two sisters, who are showing tremendous bravery in the face of senseless tragedy.
I would ask you please, at this time, to respect the fact that Diana was part of a family, and amongst the general mourning at her death, realise that we too need space to pay our final respects to our own flesh and blood. For that, we will need privacy. Finally, the one consolation is that Diana is now in a place where no human being can ever touch her again. I pray that she rests in peace.
The night before Diana's funeral, William and Harry had prayed beside her coffin with their family and with leaders of the Landmine Survivors Network with whom she had recently visited Bosnia. William and Harry chose to walk behind the coffin. Earl Spencer commented, "My admiration for those boys is beyond bounds. It was the most amazing display of courage I'll ever see." In his eulogy to Diana from Westminster Abbey, he swore the Spencer family would protect them.
And the sparkle in those unforgettable eyes, your boundless energy.
He pledged that Diana's blood family would continue the way she was rearing her sons, so that they were not simply immersed in duty and tradition.
Bearing in mind what Earl Spencer said at the Abbey in that very contentious and rather bitter speech about the blood family looking over the upbringing of the boys, one would have expected them to see more of William and Harry. They don't, and one of the reasons, undoubtedly, is that what Earl Spencer said upset Prince Charles because it called into question his abilities as a father. Most fathers don't need another family, albeit the in-law family, to say, we shall be watching you, we shall be watching you. And it was a very unfortunate choice of words that he used.
Diana went home to Althorp, the Spencer family estate. She was buried on a tranquil island in a lake within the park of her ancestral home. Flowers were taken to her grave and scattered so that they will reseed and grow again. Her brother chose the island as her final resting place so that William and Harry would be able to visit her graveside in privacy. On Mother's Day, they sent flowers there. Earl Spencer opened Althorp and its Diana Museum to the public for 2 months a year. Diana's will had given the Spencer family the moral authority to help guide William and Harry to maturity, but the boys remained closer to their father than their uncle. In her final years, Diana and her brother had not been close.
They hadn't really seen eye to eye for quite a long time. They'd had their ups and downs, and the families didn't really meet very frequently in a year. So Charles Spencer's family and his children hardly knew William and Harry, as a result of which it is definitely known that the boys do want to be with their father on all occasions now. I mean, they go to Highgrove to see him when they can, and throughout the holidays they want to be with him. Also remember that Charles has deliberately gone out of his way to have his diary cleared for school holidays so he can spend as much time with the boys as he can.
When Charles is unavailable, Tiggy Leg Burke takes over. Often described as a nanny, she is from a courtier's family and is more like a big sister to the boys. Diana had resented her.
The public was very anxious while Diana was alive, and I think the public sided with Diana, who always felt that since she didn't need to engage a man to sort of play the role of father when the boys were with her, she never quite understood why Charles needed to engage a woman to play the role of mother when they were with him. However, they do like Tiggy. They like her a lot.
The other woman in their lives is Camilla Parker Bowles, whom Diana blamed for the breakdown of her marriage. Public opinion is still divided over her acceptance as Charles's partner.
I would hope that over time, whatever happens in terms of her public role or her public relationship with the prince, that if she is, as we all understand, she is such a good and wonderful friend to him and somebody with whom he feels so sympathetic and so close, that she could establish that kind of relationship with the boys.
She's brought up 2 children of her own. One suspects he asks her advice from time to time about things. In the recent years, in the crucial, recent, difficult years when the boys were growing up and when it became clear, even to them, that they could not avoid knowing about the existence of this lady.
In July 1998, it emerged that William had agreed to meet Camilla. Charles had recognised the maturity in his elder son.
Only recently, in fact, has Charles had any form of formal discussion about the situation with William. William's attitude was, whatever makes you happy, Papa.
The Queen Mother shares the Queen's pride in Diana's boys. William in particular has grown close to the Queen, who has identified in her grandson the qualities required to make a fine king.
William's relationship's growing steadily closer to the Queen. He goes to visit her on Sunday afternoons for tea, and they can have great chats. I mean, she's invested all her hopes for the future in William. He's the boy that's, we hope, will be the saviour of the monarchy. I'm sure she'll want to teach him the value of the things that she values. You don't suddenly become king overnight. You've got to learn the ropes.
Whether William, given that all he's been through, might say in the next few years, who needs this? The people don't seem to want us anymore. We're going into Europe. What's the monarchy's role? It would be very human and people would understand if he said, I don't think I want to do this.
Can Diana's sons hope for personal happiness after their great loss?
Let's just hope for both their sakes that those boys are given the freedom to make marriages that really work, find girls that they really care about, who really care about them, who are prepared to put up with all the inconveniences of being royal, as well as the considerable perks and home comforts of being royal, but above all that these marriages don't end in divorce like their parents, like so many royal marriages recently, because of the strains and because of the people in the House of Windsor being so cold to the people that marry into it. I think Diana's left enough with those boys for that not to be true of them.
Most boys like to get a girl just like their mother was. But for William, is there another girl out there who's, you know, maybe 12 or 13, 14 today, who's going to grow into somebody who's not only as beautiful as Diana, but as compassionate, as warm, have that magic with ordinary people?
As the years go by without her, Diana's sons will draw on her legacy of love and her caring for others. Earl Spencer said, Diana brought to their lives something quite different and wonderful. With Prince Charles's help, they will build on her foundation, making a more secure monarchy for the future. Diana's efforts will not have been in vain.